today is a very special vigil because we will be talking about not only the news with Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, but we will also be discussing our intentions of traveling to DC and London for the full extradition hearing, which is to take place at the end of February of this year. But before we get to all of that, here are some stats for you guys. Remember that today is day 3,323 of the unlawful and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange, and day 276 since his brutal arrest outside the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And as for Chelsea Manning, today is day 305 since she has been imprisoned, and she is now up to $196,000 in fines. Guys, remember, she is being fined $1,000 a day each day that she refuses to testify before a grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. So before we introduce our guests for today's show, I want to hand it off to independent journalist or British independent journalist, Gordon Dimmack. And I also want to thank him for streaming with us and collaborating with us, as well as my co-host, Steve, on his channel, Slow News Day Show. So Gordon, again, thank you so much for collaborating with us. How are you?
I'm very well, Taylor. I'm very tired, though. I think I broke myself already this year. It's the 12th, and I think I've honestly broken my brain. However, I've been working tirelessly on the Assange campaign, as you all have, and I think I have reached a situation now where I can come to a conclusion and tell you that this Assange trial and this whole incarceration of him is not what it seems. I don't believe it is anyway. Now, I'm going to try and explain to everybody as articulately and as calmly as possible, because this is extremely important. There are huge ramifications, and then things, you know what, people can get hurt as well if this information, what I'm about to tell you, is used in the wrong way. Okay? Now, this is what I believe from all of my time researching this on the Julian Assange issue. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to give you a bit of a story here, so I'm very sorry. You'll have to bear with me. I'm an old man. I can go on a bit of a rant and a ramble. I can see war when it's coming. When I was a young boy, I used to go to bed at night and I used to look up at my airfix plane that I built. Spitfire, the Lancaster bomber, the Hurricane. I was a student of war. When I was younger, I just had a thirst for knowledge on it. It was fascinating to me how so much suffering can happen. Also, there's a lot of propaganda when you're a young boy as well. I mean, you can go to the tube down here and there's adverts for the Navy. Go and visit the ship, you know, and they're trying to get you into the military and feel very nationalistic. There's a lot of nationalistic pride, especially, you know, around wartime. As I grew older, I saw it in comic books, and I also saw it in other things that I looked at as well. Like I say, I became a student of war. When I got older into my teens, even the games I used to play on my computer were things like Medal of Honor and Gunship 2000, etc., etc. Now, I'm not telling you that I'm an expert on propaganda because of this, but what I'm telling you is I had a thirst for knowledge about wartime and what happens around wartime. Because of that, I knew that whenever war breaks out, there was really only one precursor you needed to watch out for. The media breaks. It breaks completely every time the war happens. And it broke a couple of years ago now. And everybody's trying to be figuring out why. I knew instantly as soon as it happened. I didn't want to because it's war. It's horrible. It's awful. And honestly, I've set myself crazy thinking about this. But I could see propaganda and how, and also when I was, how can I say this? When I was growing up and obviously being a student of war, I could see the propaganda on both sides of it as well. I could see it. I could see how in wartime, even going back to World War II, they would take over local radio stations first. You know, you saw it in other instances of films that are nationalistic and also historical facts and propaganda as well. Saving Private Ryan, there's a line in it where he says, yeah, that's our friendly radio station guy, and he's in the back shouting German saying the Statue of Liberty is kaput, the Hollywood sign is crumbled. It's propaganda. It always happens during wartime, always, without fail. So, for this and many reasons I won't go into here, but I will expand on it if anybody wants to ask me any questions. At the outbreak of any war, at the outbreak of any war, there is always a crackdown on media and incredible censorship. It always happens. It happened in World War One, it happened in World War Two. It's followed by something else I found as well. The persecution of journalists, the murder of journalists, massive disinformation campaigns, so you don't know what's going on, and there's a fog of war around you, and it's like, oh shit, what's the go? And people on the ground, even people on the ground, the propaganda when war breaks out is always the same. People on the ground say, what war? What war? Well, that's because the massive disinformation campaign that's keeping you quiet. It has to be done like this, because in the wrong hands, information can be really, really disruptive and powerful. Okay? Yeah, I wonder, by the way, of all that stuff that I've just described, I wonder if we've seen it in the last couple of years. But the point I'm trying to make is I know war when I see it, right? I'm not talking, by the way, about the latest dick swing on Twitter between Khamenei and Trump. And I'm not talking about that. That's not the war I'm talking about. That's the sideshow, okay? It is serious what's happening there. What I'm talking about is the information war, okay? Now, I can't say exactly when it started or why, but I have documented as much as I think I possibly could on my channel about it, without saying it as much as possible, you know, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure in my head what it was. It wasn't until the end of the year, really, that it finally went in my head. Now, the information war is just the same as any war, okay? The information war in the wrong hands can cost people's lives. It can kill people, just as economic sanctions can and other versions of hybrid warfare. For instance, in the information war, information can be weaponized. Apps, downloads, I mean, we are in the information age after all. Apps, downloads, social media accounts, internet traffic, search habits, social media trends, all of these things and more are being used to manipulate every single one of us on the internet so that, you know, people can buy more stuff, for instance, or vote one way or another, or manipulate people into clicking on something that will sell them that miracle pill that you eat. And honestly, it will give you a raging boner and huge tits and make you lose loads of weight. It's free for the first 2 months, but then it's $49.99. You have to cancel. But by the time you cancel, you find out that the place is in Dubai and there's no chance that you're getting the money back. And oh, by the way, they've got your credit card information. And well, what do you know? They've hacked your email, and all of a sudden, they've found pictures of you masturbating in front of the computer, and you're a lawyer, and now it can use that information to levy your power. Okay? The information war is just as deadly as any other. That's in my opinion, anyway. Now, obviously, nuclear war people can say I'm being grandiose, but it's serious. People can get killed. You've seen journalists get killed in the last few years, and all sorts of other people. By the way, okay, I suppose I better get to the point. Information, what I'm saying, can be leveraged. It can be leveraged against the powerful. It can be leveraged against the Pope or President or member of parliament or a banker or a lawyer or a doctor or anybody high profile, actor, royal family, sportsman, racing car driver, whatever you want. Power can be leveraged and then that person manipulated You can see what I mean. It's powerful. And also, on top of that, just with an image, because of all the data that has been harvested about you, your opinion can change from Labour to Conservative, especially if that company knows everything about you. And if you've spent your life on social media, they know an awful lot about you. I quit Facebook 2-3 years ago now for a reason, okay? And these things, I remember when I started in internet marketing, okay? I was there when these bots attacked, according to Rachel Maddow. They weren't all Russian, and the ones that were Russian weren't all state-owned, and it's all great hysteria. I was there in the middle of it. I saw what it was. They were weaponizing information. It wasn't necessarily a state actor. It wasn't necessarily a country. It could be construed as coming from a country, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a state actor. That's for the MI5 and GCHQ and the FBI to sort out. I can't tell you. What I can tell you, though, is information is valuable. We are in the information age, and lots of people have lots of information on lots of us, and it's being stored incessantly. We have got a permanent record now. Go read Snowden's book. Everything we have done online, it's there. They can find it. They're seeing everything you do. Everything. Now, I have a theory, okay? In any war, there is not only propaganda and weaponizing of it, obviously, of information, but also disinformation as well. And by the way, one of the dead journalists I talked about turned up alive a couple of days later. Do you remember that Ukrainian guy? You talking about the information war? You'll see what I mean. Disinformation in the last couple of years has been huge. You know this. You've seen it. And no other story has had more disinformation surrounding it and lies, in my opinion, than the one surrounding Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. What have they tried to tell him in the media? What do I say? When the media breaks, you know it's war. You know it's coming. They said he's a cyber terrorist. They called him smelly. Every mistake went the wrong way. That was the BBC, by the way. They thought it was they thought another account other than his was saying I don't shower. So they called him smelly. It's propaganda warfare. They said he hates animals, he's horrible to his cat. And then, oh, he's in Russia. People said, no, he's dead. And then there was all the QAnon bullshit that came out about him. Oh, trust in the plan. Don't worry about it. You know, my favourite one, he's a CIA asset. Where that came from, I don't know. But my favourite of all is Trump is going to pardon. Yes, of course. He's been in arbitrary detention for 7 years, and Trump has basically reached in and trying to basically, looks like, torture him, and he's going to pardon him. Something's iffy there with that theory, in my mind. And then there's the worst kind of disinformation and information and smear against that he was a rapist. This is the worst kind of smear. Now, I've documented a great lady called Lisa Longstaff. She spoke at the Free the Truth event not long ago. I did videos of it. It was on my channel. She was from the Women, I think it's called Women Against Rape. Forgive me if I get the group wrong. But she was saying how what they associated Julian Assange with, when you actually looked at the facts of the case, was a disservice to rape victims and did more harm than good. That's not word for word, but that's the ethos of what she said. Go and watch the speech, it was great. First, we heard that it was just a sexual investigation from Sweden, that's all it was. And obviously, it was dropped and he came to the UK, and then he sought asylum, didn't he? And obviously, we can talk about the details of that endlessly. You all know the details better than anybody in the mainstream media as to what's happened to Julian Assange since he's been in the embassy. They said he was jumping bail because of that sexual assault investigation in Sweden. It's not true. He said it's because the Americans wanted there's an indictment under seal. Guess what? Now they've got him. The rape investigation went away. The seal was unbroken. Julian Assange was once again proven to be telling the truth and right. This is dangerous. is dangerous for the countries involved. Anyway, when he was dragged out in that act of fascism, as John White calls it last year, it's last year now. The charges he now faces 175 years in prison, and if he's extradited, and if it is the extradition request that we are seeing in this country, he'll be indicted and he'll go to Virginia and he'll serve out 175 years. The Virginia court will be, it's in Virginia for Christ's sake, it's where the CIA headquarters is, Langley. You know, it's not quite Langley, it's a different area, but that's what the propaganda in the TV shows tell you anyway. It's not quite right. But the jury there are all obviously they're all 2 shades away from military, you know. It's a secret court. He can't provide any evidence, and the prosecution will have years in defence and just present the information. It's secret. And he'll go away for 175 years, and we'll never, ever, ever hear the end of it. There's a reason I keep saying democracy dies in darkness, because it's democracy that's at stake here. Julian Assange, in my opinion, he knows it. More charges might be put on him in that secret court. We have no guarantees that they won't. None. If they think that democracy is going to die in darkness, they can get fucked. It's not. That's not going to be cricket. It's going to be done in the open, and it's going to be done in front of people, good people of the country that they're supposed to be serving these motherfuckers in power. All right? I believe that what you are seeing right now being played out in the courts, and what you're seeing right now with the fact that no fucking politician in the Labour Party or Bernie Sanders and the DNC, other than Tulsi Gabbard, will answer the question about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Don't you find that strange, considering Julian Assange has a perfect record as a publisher and journalist, obviously, but that Jeremy Corbyn knows that without a fourth estate as such as Julian Assange says he is, democracy cannot work. Cannot. This is where I think this is heading. I think Julian Assange is a conscientious objectioner in this information war we are in, which is also something that happens in wartime, by the way. Conscientious objections, remember. This is the biggest case in press freedom ever, period. Nobody on this planet would disagree with me, not a single person. So if that's the case, why are the politicians so silent? Why was Jeremy Corbyn, as I tweeted out today, I haven't spoken to Joe yet, but Joe did a great job. Just asking him, Jack Willow, who you guys know, he's done a great job asking the candidates. None of them want to speak about anything, do they? They don't want to answer. In fact, it's almost like there's a military operation around them, stopping them from actually anybody asking them that question. I know. They're blocking the information to me as well, you know? It's a military operation, this is. We're at war. In wartime, yeah, the military take over. This is what I believe has happened in this information war. The military also run the media in that time. They do what happens. I'm a historian of it, like I say. They do it. Now, I have lots of examples of our media's only source for a story being, and especially The Guardian, of only source being somebody within the military, or somebody who was attached to the military, or somebody in the private sector, which is now got a contract with the military, that used to have some seat with the military. All of the stories from The Guardian seem to be sourced from the military or from intelligence agents. You know, I looked at one guy the other day. And honestly, the amount of stories that have been sourced from him is ridiculous. He was the guy that came up with the documentary that was made from the BBC off it, saying that the Novichok could only be used in Chickney. It could only be produced in Chickney. You might remember that. I did a video about it. It was a Newsnight special. He also has been attached to the White Helmets in Syria. His company sells respirators. And you know, he's produced lots of information with regards to the Duma attack.
So,
okay? What? Let me finish, please, Taylor. I'm nearly done.
Yes. Okay.
We are at war. There's no two ways about it. I really do think we are. And just as in 2003 in Iraq and every single war in time in his history, the propaganda, the media are lying to us about it. They do it every time. This is a war, this information war, that in my opinion has put the fundamentals of journalism and the fourth estate on trial. And if that is the case, it's put democracy on trial as well. The information war is a war over the silencing of the digital equivalent of the fourth estate. Because, let me explain, I've said this before, the fundamentals of journalism are gather information or be a source of information that comes to you, verify the information is true, publish it if it is in the public interest, and protect your source. Those 5 things are done by WikiLeaks better than any other journalistic outlet on the planet ever times a million. This is why WikiLeaks have had more scoops of global value in the last 15 years than the entire media combined in the previous, I don't know, insert a number there. Ever? Look at how many documents they have published. Because freedom of the press, because it is at risk here, and because democracy has been hijacked as a result and proven to be hijacked, we must have a trial about this in the open, because otherwise it's just our cricket. It's not the British way. Information can be weaponized. Now, I don't know what has caused this information war, but some sort of information during Assange, I don't know. Maybe he can shed more light on the story, but information can be weaponized. Look at how much is in the public ear at the time. Look at how much stories of massive gravitas are in the story in the media right now. Just the stuff I've talked about and all the people with, you know, when you look at huge stories. Even if you look at conspiracy stories, there are some huge ones there that, you know, people would love to find out about. It can be weaponized. And if it can be weaponized and bring a country down, then you know what? You're damn sure the military of the United Kingdom are going to fucking react, and they're going to react quick. They're going to take it over, they're going to take over the country, and they're going to try and hold it together in a time of crisis. I've studied this, right? I have studied the way the military works in early wartime, and the best at it are the British. You only need to look at the BBC, 35,000 people working in their news organisation. It's huge. When I highlighted this in one of my videos, I heard Lee Stranahan say it's outside Belmarsh prison. He said they've thrown journalism in jail. That's exactly what they've done. This is why they're, in my opinion, trying to break Julian Assange, because he's making a stand for all of us. Now, with that knowledge, because knowledge can crash economies, it can bring down all sorts of institutions, big institutions, and like I say, very powerful people, their power can be leveraged by other actors in other countries. Doesn't necessarily make the other countries the bad guys. It could just be a group of bloody Indonesians that are doing something. But, you know, information can be weaponized, and there's a lot out of it. I am positive that they have suppressed me in this information. I'm positive that they've stopped my voice getting out there. I'm positive that, you know, they've tried to nudge people into better behaviours, and I think you're about to see a lot more of it. One of you mentioned the Extinction Rebellion protests and the fact that they're centering down on, shall we say, excitable speech. We need to be very careful with this as well. Okay, very careful. We need to make sure that we handle this in a sensible way. If what I'm saying is right, this is just my theory. Okay, I'm never exactly right, but I'm usually around that area. You know, I'm somewhere around it. I hope I have been as responsible as possible in sharing this information. And finally, I want to end on this. And hopefully people won't think I'm a crazy kooky Alex Jones conspiracy theorist when I've come out with this. I've got documentation, and I've got a brain, and I've got my critical thinking skills. This is what I think is happening. And we must stop it. Therefore, as activists, we have to be responsible, and we have to make sure people share the truth. And we also have to make sure we don't try and manipulate minds in the same way that fucking things like Cambridge Analytica do on Facebook. The disinformation that is going to be happening around this could be massive, and they could steal democracy from us just with fucking by denying us information. Okay, so we've got to be very careful, and I want to end on this. If what I am saying is right, and there's a military operation that has been put into effect to protect the United Kingdom or Great Britain or whatever you want to call it, I want to say I am the most fucking impressed person in the country right now. I could not be prouder of the military. They have done a brilliant job if what I'm saying is true. Even for me to figure it out. I mean, honestly, if I figured it out, I'd went crazy and insane 17 times while I was doing it. I think this whole thing, this whole war on information began with, you know, Orwellian names and initiatives and all sorts. But you know what? That's for better journalists than me to find out. The only reason I can look at this now is finally, when I was looking at the end of year review, I zoomed out and collated the whole year. And I don't know, the penny dropped. We'll see. We'll see whether I'm right or not. You might think I'm absolutely crazy. I don't know. I can see you've still got your eyes on me, and you're not looking like I've got two heads. So I'm somewhere in the ballpark, maybe. There has been so many lies about Julian Assange. I want to end this. And this is why it's so important. I wanted to share this with you guys first. You are trustworthy. You know the truth with regards to Julian Assange, and you all work fucking hard. And some of you out there, Tariq, I'm looking at you, stand up for what's right. All right? Stand up for the truth. Democracy cannot die in darkness. If they're going to have a trial over democracy, they better have it in the fucking open. They better have it at Belmarsh, because anything else isn't cricket. I believe they will. I trust my country will do that. And if there's been a military operation like I've seen, I know one when I see one. It's commendable, and I salute every single man in service. I really do. You protected the country from an attack, and it was an attack. Information is fucking deadly. Thanks very much, everybody. I'm not sure how long that went on. This is what I have spent the last 8-9 months of my life trying to do. I think I've broken my head. I am now going to hand it over to you, so you can maybe talk about what I found and call me a lunatic or whatever. But this is what I think has happened.
So,
by the way, can I end on this? Jeremy Corbyn, if what I'm said is true, you're not weak. You're a patriot. And I hope people remember you for that.
So, Gordon, thank you so much for that. None of us here are looking at you like you have two heads. That's often kind of the reaction that we get from outsiders, really. I want to reiterate one point before I do open it up to my co-host. And then after we discuss your statements that you just made, we will introduce the first guest. But I always have said, and I wrote this in my article where I talk about the presidential candidates and where they stand on Julian Assange in particular, how a candidate or politician says they will treat the ultimate check on power, being journalists and Julian Assange specifically, is indicative of how that candidate and politician will behave once they are in power. And I think that that is sort of to summarize some of the points that you had just made. Now, I do want to open it up to Andrew, Christy, and Steve, and then we'll intro our first guest.
Look, I mean, look at where we're at right now. Look at the guests that have been on the vigils prior. Look at who our guest is today and why we reached out to him in the first place. Everything that Gordon said is correct, and we've got documentation on it. I mean, any critically thinking person would be able to look at the way that information is shared in this country, how it's shared, and what spin centers around it, and come to the exact same conclusions. No, I don't think you're crazy, Gordon. I think you're spot on, and I'm glad you decided to air it out on the show today. 100%.
And I think a big point too, something that Gordon said that really mattered to me, that really brought it home. This wasn't it was an act of fascism that we saw, but I think the better way to classify it with everything that Gordon pointed out is Julian Assange getting taken out of the embassy. That's an act of war. That's almost no different than the general in Iran being assassinated. It is someone who is on the international stage leading the charge against the misinformation to provide accurate information to the public. And he got literally pulled out of an embassy in violation of that nation's laws, of international law, and then dragged to a prison only to be held there on completely political charges. So that is, I can't imagine what a better act of war would be against free speech and against a free press.
I want to thank Gordon for expressing all this on our show and the passion he's brought to stating these things. I think all too often we feel that we are preaching to the choir and we are not conveying enough to the public on how important Julian Assange's case is, how important Julian Assange himself is, and what is really at stake here. I think as the last few weeks have transpired and what we're looking at ahead, and we see this war coming and we realize we're already there, we have to let people know, we have to get out of our bubble and show the world how important he is and what is being done to him.
Just step in there, you mentioned bubble there, Christy. In the UK, this is from what I've seen, the part of the initiative, obviously, to protect the UK from disinformation was specifically to make sure that they kept people in bubbles. They kept people in bubbles, so information did not spread, because if the wrong people see a wrong image, it can send them nuts, especially if it's something that is personal to them, or especially if it's something that they feel aggrieved about. We have to be so careful with the information that we share, and they will have made sure we're in the bubble. Now, I trust, believe it or not, you won't believe this, but I do trust not my government, my institution of Great Britain, if you know what I mean. The institution will go on no matter what happens. You see what I mean? It will go on. And it's a great institution. And I trust that they are trying to do the right thing here. I trust that they are. And I trust that after the word gets out about this, if I'm right, the suppression and the censorship will lift slightly. and they'll start allowing people to talk about it in the correct way, because we're facing a serious crossroads in history at the moment. Serious. And I do trust that they will do that. And we need to be responsible. At the outbreak of war, remember, I said that people in war in World War I and World War II were like, well, what war? So World War II, what war? It was called the phony war. World War II was at the beginning. It was called the phony war because nobody saw any bombs go off. But trust me, the war was happening. It's the same now. And they lift censorship after a bit because people realise, hold on a minute, loose lips really do sink ships. That's where it came from, you know. It's that sort of mentality.
Well,
so they will have stressed people with military exercise.
There was one point I wanted to bring up because Gordon has talked so extensively about the information war in the UK. And I want to point out the information war in the US and what that has done to Julian Assange and how difficult it is to rally the US because of the information war, because of the character smears, because of the fingers pointed at Julian Assange that gave us Trump, that are pointing in the opposite direction to where we should be looking at. The fingers that are pointing to a man who is suffering in Belmarsh and dying as the root cause of this is turning a blind eye to what's really happening. And they've done a hell of a good job of it here. It's very difficult to overcome these lies and smears in the US that have been pointed at WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And yeah, they're really good at it and they're going to keep it up. And that is something that we are struggling with. And one of the reasons that we are here and trying to speak up and getting more people to speak up and rally for him, because we have a major information war in the US and it's not going away anytime soon.
And that's why I think the work of people like Dak Rouleau, getting out and questioning candidates is so important.
Yes.
Because to Gordon's point, it's called the Mockingbird media. That's the United States CIA term. And Christy and I saw it live in RT Studios, where they had a TV up that had RT News, and then it had Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. And as soon as a headline would change on one of them, within a minute or two, the headline would change on the other, the topic would change, the guest would change. So no matter which one of those mainstream things you were watching, you were getting fed the exact same information about the exact same thing. And then they would all pretty much at the same time click to a divisive topic talk show. And then a few minutes later, click back to a standard topic talking point, and then all show the same commercials in between.
This is
so calling out stuff like that.
No, let's put it into context of what we're doing here today, though, and to kind of further drive home Gordon's point. Because what is WikiLeaks? What does WikiLeaks do at its most core function? It takes primary source material, documentation, emails, text message, whatever, cables, and delivers that to the public with their, eventually with a little bit of commentary beforehand. But when the US media or the UK media has a breaking news story or has an investigative report, the investigative report has already gone through a series of channels where a number of different editors have had the opportunity to step in and sign off on it or to step in and shut it down. There is no, the United States government doesn't want us to print this, so we're not going to print this.
And the best example here is the war in Afghanistan, right? So years and years ago, over a decade ago, WikiLeaks released the information about the cost of the war in Afghanistan, what we were paying for rocket launchers versus what we actually paid to get them made, because we fund the corporations that are making them and all this stuff.
Literal itemized fucking inventory list.
Followed by Chelsea Manning's releases of Iraq and Afghanistan, where they showed that we had no idea what we were doing, that we were in gross violation of international law. And then now, a decade after that, once all of this is being litigated in court, once the journalists are arrested and the whistleblowers are in jail, they now release some report that shows that we have no idea what the fuck we're doing in Afghanistan, where if you've been paying attention, you would have known we have no idea what the fuck we're doing in Afghanistan the whole time.
Yeah, I've said the whole time that the Afghan papers, that the Washington Post produced and presented with much, a ton of attention attracted to it. It vindicates Chelsea Manning. It validates everything that WikiLeaks has put out regarding Afghanistan, yet no one is making that connection. And to drive home Gordon's point, they're not making the connection on purpose. And we might as well introduce Tariq at this point, because that's why he's here ostensibly, is to lend.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I would like to definitely get Tariq in here. I would like to say that, we've been talking about censorship. It's a common theme with the vigils, and our next guest in particular is able to speak to that because, unfortunately, he has encountered that in his own career. So I am introducing to you guys a journalist whom I have a great deal of respect for, Tariq Haddad. Tariq has worked at the Hull Daily Mail, the International Business Times UK, and Newsweek. He resigned from his role with Newsweek after his attempts to publish newsworthy revelations about a leaked letter from the UN-backed Chemical Weapons Board, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or the OPCW, which were suppressed by Newsweek editors. So, Tariq, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me on. I'm good.
Yeah.
Pleased to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. Now, in your own words, can you explain to us exactly at what moment you started to realize that you were being censored and that the editors were not really looking at the facts, but they were trying to suppress a news story? I know you've spoken about it before on other shows, but for our audience, I want you to explain that moment and what was going through your head.
Sure. So I was writing other stories, as I do. Very often I'm writing about foreign affairs or Syria. I was doing some other stories about chemical weapons. Turkey allegedly used chemical weapons in northern Syria, so I was investigating this. And that's when I started to hear kind of stories about what was going on at the OPCW, and started to hear about whistleblowers, as I'm sure you've all heard. So as I started following this story, obviously, as a journalist, there's always a threshold that I kind of need to reach before, I can go to my editors and say, this is a worthwhile story. I can't just say, oh, I've seen this in a leaflet or whatever. It has to be, the sources have to be solid, and especially if it's something as controversial as the UN's chemical weapons body issuing fake reports. But late November, I reached the point that enough evidence was there. So a letter was published in the Mail on Sunday, verified by Reuters, and obviously released by WikiLeaks in 4 stages so far. So yeah, it was when I had evidence that I believed was journalistically sound that I thought I can approach my editors. I did so, and they tried to essentially smear the sources of information of where it came from instead of kind of actually looking at the facts. So the Mail on Sunday was smeared as a publication because, well, I'm sure you guys in America all know Mail Online, and they have a slightly bad reputation journalistically. But like I've said before, what I think most people don't realize is that they have a newspaper which is actually still very good, even though a lot of people might disagree with their politics, but from a journalism point of view and journalism standards point of view, it's still a good newspaper. So, it was published in that newspaper, verified by Reuters, which is like the gold standard of facts, usually of journalism. So, Reuters as well. But yeah, so I was those places were smeared. I kept pushing. And then there's been a petition of Bellingham, which is, I think, important for people to understand. And I'm sure, well, are you guys aware of Bellingcat and everything? I'm sure you're all up to date.
Just for you, Bellingcat will be one of the chief architects of this disinformation. Their own people, the United Kingdom. I understand why they do it now, and you know what? In some ways, I fucking agree with it. I really do. But I have to stand up. Julian's dying. I have to stand up and I have to tell people what I believe. Yeah, we know Bellingcat. We've all about Elliot Higgins.
Could you recap it for us? Because most of the...
Well, sure. So essentially their founder, Elliot Higgins, was essentially a professional troll. He was a moderator on a forum called somethingawful.com. I'm not sure at which point, but that he was a research fellow at the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank that has been set up to essentially it's the military kind of wing of, or military think tank of NATO. So it's funded by NATO, it's funded by the US government. The same Atlantic Council, actually, funnily enough, so aside from doing these projects with Bellingcat, it's also partnering with Facebook News to the Atlantic Council are contributing to what news sources are going to be considered worthwhile or not. So it's kind of this two-pronged approach where you have Bellingcat producing these kind of ready-made, essentially fake news stories, and then the kind of the list of accepted publications, which anything alternative will get left off that list. And those accepted publications will pretty much parrot what the Bellingcat line is.
Yeah, the Bellingcat are there to actually. They're not there to get the truth. They're there to push out a narrative that then can be backed up. This is basically what I've seen, and it happens with quite a few different outlets. Now, I will say this, right, and this is the truth. I don't know Elliot Higgins. I don't know or any of these people. I don't know who are the bad actors, and I don't know who knows what's going on. My fear is most people in the media have no idea what's going on, and the people that do, they have no power. And the same with the MPs. Most of the MPs have no idea what's going on, as I proved. I got 25, 30 of them to respond to during Assange, and they all push bullshit. But maybe they were under orders to do that. I don't know. It might have been part of this. I mean, I'm going crazy conspiracy theory now, but that's what things like Bellingcat and DFR Labs and these sort of things do. Now, if the government has been doing that, and they've been doing it because they have to, keep their empire, and obviously information comes out that could collapse that empire, because this looks like we've been doing some very, very, terrible stuff in Syria to try and keep, consuming, I suppose. I don't know the reasons for it, but I do know that if you release information in a certain way, and specific information, it can be taken out of context and weaponized. And if we're going to hear information, we need to hear everything. And that's what actually Julian, he tells people. That's what he wants to do. He said, there you go, there's all the raw data. You make sense of it yourself. Here's what I think. That's what WikiLeaks do. So, yeah, the Bellingcat, it's just one of them. It's one of them. There are many. I've got a big, long list.
There's a book called Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Journalists. And it documents the history of intelligence agency interference in print and television media for the last 70 years. I highly, highly recommend the book. If you haven't read it, please pick that up. And then, yes, please, Tariq, let's get your thoughts on that. I just wanted to plug the book to reassure Gordon that he's not going crazy. This has been happening for damn near a century, if not a century.
Yeah, I haven't read that book, but I'll definitely will. I think, Gordon mentioned an interesting point I think is worth picking up on, is that it's important to look at the case of Julian and everything that's going on now with Iran, Syria, Iraq in the context of empire.
Yeah, absolutely. I just to jump on your point there, it sort of is connected, but it is to do with empire. You are correct, and obviously the empire, there's another saying by John White, the excellent journalist, that Trump is the monster with the mask removed. You know, all of a sudden people are like, oh shit, I'm doing all that, and their eyes are open. And this is why, you know, the information has been weaponized in the way it is. Seriously, this information, I believe, that is being weaponized at the moment, it could collapse countries. It could collapse entire institutions that have been around centuries if it's released to the wrong person and it's in the wrong hands, or if it's released without context, etc. Now, I'm not saying that Julian Assange would do that. First, have to verify it's true and do all of his diligence and whatever. But things can be weaponized, and we have to be very, very responsible with. If I'm right, and he's a conscientious objector. I mean, they even have got him on a law that was written in 1917 for conscientious objectors to war. They've actually got him on a war on. That's what the original seal was over. So it's not like I'm talking crazy.
So you asked a question that really hit the nail on the head, and it was, why are they doing it? Like, what is causing this to happen? Why are they in such a state of information warfare? And for starters, we've always been there. And I think now people are really just recognizing and realizing it, and it's really coming home because the facade has been pulled off. We've had the ability to communicate across borders for almost 10 years now to say, hey, what's happening over there? Wow, this is happening over here. What's the truth? So I think that it's just coming almost to an end at this point. But to the larger question of why and what are they trying to do it about, I would encourage everyone to go read word for word the Gulf of Aden email, because that's the one where they talk specifically about why Interpol put out a notice to arrest Julian and put him on red alert. But also the technological breakaway that's happening right now and the move towards totalitarianism, where technology is being used and created at such a rate that most people don't even realize what technology exists and what can be done with it. And the best worst term to use would be they're trying to build a breakaway civilization, or essentially trying to develop a way that they can automate away the working force, where they don't need to have a working class and an underclass. They just would have aristocracy and automation, and everyone else would just be human fodder, essentially.
The way I describe it, everyone else would literally be cattle. That's just dumb animals that are just consuming. That's essentially the way I look at it. But to pivot it back to the conversation we were having before with Tariq, that's exactly why they censor him and remove him, because he's exposing those elements, and you were exposing those elements of that greater infrastructure system that WikiLeaks was trying to expose. And simply by you taking that stand, it pulls so many people out of their narrative that believe in you and follow you. So I can't say enough that I truly appreciate you standing up and saying, like, no, I can't watch this happen.
Thank you. I mean, just to kind of try and tie a few of the pieces together, because when I sort of came out from Newsweek and, you know, resigned and everything, obviously I got all this crazy attention, or maybe not that crazy, but, you know, it felt crazy to me. And I thought I uncovered this really big thing and this big scandalous thing. And actually, within a matter of days, I kind of realized this is just a very, very tiny scratching of the surface. It goes so much deeper than what I'm saying. And some of, you know, I've been in contact with lots of different journalists from other publications, and some of the evidence I've seen is pretty shocking. But the reason I think, you know, because I think everyone listening here, everyone talking in this conversation will all agree about Julian Assange and how important he is. There's no point sitting here for 2 hours and just kind of tapping ourselves back to say, oh, how great he is and what, you know, I think we all appreciate that. I think what's important to kind of, you know, is how to move forward. And I think what people need to understand going forward is that, and this sounds very dramatic, but I really mean it seriously, is that our our manipulation of the media has got to such an extent that we genuinely don't know our own history. And so what's happening is that our society is actually building itself up on lies. So we're getting this stage actually, and the reason I think it's so serious is that I think Western society is at serious risk of collapse, and I don't mean that in a good way. I know some people will, and I probably used to be one of them back in the day of, I want to overthrow society, I want to have a new system. I think that's completely unrealistic, and what we'll get is something much worse. But the freedom of speech is, the founding principle of the Western world, and it's quickly dying. And what you're seeing now, and I think this is what I was trying to mention before about the empires thing, whatever people say about Russia, China, Iran, what is actually not understood in those countries is that they actually have a very strong sense of truth. If you look at science, maths, engineering in those countries, it's extremely strong, stronger than it is in the US. If you look at how much they spend on education, it's much more than the US. You're seeing now that these countries essentially they've become so sick of the Western world, or United States and United Kingdom, routinely breaking international law. This has happened long before Julian Assange. It's happened, as soon as the United Nations was established, we criticized every single other country without ever, trying to prosecute people on, that committed crimes within our own countries. What's happened now, and I've learned this in the last few weeks, is that Russia, China, Iran, Iraq, lots of other countries in the region have reached an agreement together to say we're sick of the US breaking international law and sovereignty of countries, because they've all been at the end of that. So that's what they're trying to do there in terms of re-establish rule of law and sovereignty. And I think what you're seeing at the moment is that the United States empire is shrinking because it's completely lost that freedom of speech aspect, or that element of truth aspect in its wider culture. Obviously, it still exists. We can still have this conversation, but that empire is going to keep shrinking until it addresses that. I'm not even sure we can, but I think one of the important things is to really start stressing. This is not just about Julian Assange. This is not just about Syria, because all these issues are very fringe topics to certain people. But I think, for everyone listening and for you guys going forward, you need to kind of frame this in the way of, this is about literally the history, or, the future of the United States and the West. It's not going to exist as the country that you know it in 10, 15 years' time if you continue down this path of not pursuing the truth. It's actually very funny when you think about it. The situation now in the United States is almost like a polar opposite of, or like a flip of, what happened in the Soviet Union. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote this, great book, The Gulag Archipelago, which showed all the crimes of the Soviet Union. He was brought to the West, and obviously at the time we were supportive of free speech, and we celebrated him coming to the US, and we said, oh, how great it was that he exposed the crimes of the Soviet government, and how brave it was of him to do it. And now we actually have this flip situation where Edward Snowden is living in Russia, and now we've become that country where freedom of speech is not tolerated.
So, Tariq, Susie Dawson actually put it best when she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, she said that the West in the United States is very quick to condemn countries like Russia, China, and Iran for human rights abuses and for persecuting journalists. So to speak. But when it happens to our own people in the West and in America, as we've seen with Max Blumenthal, we're completely silent. And we don't want to mention that we really don't have a free press. So you're right. This is much bigger than Julian Assange. We're just seeing this happen through him in particular. I want to take this moment real quick, and then I'll let you go ahead, Gordon. We got to do this, though. I'm sure one of my co-hosts will be able to put in the chat. Again, we are taking some initiative for the February full extradition hearing. As you know, Christy and Andrew intend on going to D.C., and Steve and I intend on going to London to actually cover this because he and I have a journalism background. And then stateside, Christy and Andrew will be involved in peaceful protests and peaceful demonstrations. So if you do want to see this coverage from us and you do want to participate in these meaningful demonstrations, we are very grateful for any donation that you can provide us. And if you can't donate, that's totally fine. Not everybody is able to do so. Just circulating that link for us on social media is very helpful and very appreciated. I wanted to get that out there, and I'm sure one of my co-hosts put it in the chat for you guys. Gordon, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to do the same thing, Tyler. I just wanted to say, please, if you can, support these guys and support the fundraiser and try and get them over here and to DC, because if I'm right, if what I've said in this video tonight is right, if what I've revealed is right, there is going to be a massive, and I'm telling you, a propaganda campaign like you have never seen before on the outside. It is going to be a circus. There is going to be all sorts of misinformation and bad actors around trying to influence and trying to raise something or to get some seed. So we need people with not just with level heads. I might rule myself out here, but some people with level heads who not only are level-headed and know that peaceful protest is what Julian would want, but also, and this is most important, know the facts around this case. You are not going to get the truth from the mainstream media. You're not. One of the reasons why I came out with this is to beat the fucking BBC, because the BBC know what's going on. I'm sure of it. There are little clues along the way, such as I won't go into. I'll maybe expand on them in another video. But I want you guys to know that I really appreciate your work. I really do. There's been times over the last 9 months since I had this letter that I felt like I was going crazy. And you have kept me sane. And I also want to say this. I want to say a big thank you to everybody, every single person who I have highlighted their work on my show when it comes to Julian Assange. I'm talking everybody. Left, right, centre, authoritarian, libertarian, I don't give a shit who you are. You know, if you're the most liberal lefty to the most right-wing, MAGA-loving, whatever, I don't care. If you have given me sources of information to try and get this head to figure it out, and I'm right, just thank you. I stood on the shoulders of giants, if that's the case. I fucking love you all, and the list is so long, I can't thank you all. But I want people to know in the chat that these people need to be there. I need the goddamn help over here in London, because Lord knows I'm not strong enough to be able to withstand the onslaught that's about to happen in February when this case goes to trial. If I'm right, it's going to be the trial of the century. These people have to be there.
Gordon has been amazing that every time there's a hearing, every time Julian Assange is being carted from Belmarsh to Westminster Magistrates, you have been there live streaming, trying to catch a glimpse, trying to cover as much as you can as one person. And that has really been an inspiration to us to want to be there with you. And, you noticed
the last time I was there, I was trying to be in 17 different places at once due to try to get an overall picture.
Right. And so I just wanted to explain, because I think we have a lot of new viewers, especially on Gordon's channel. The reason we're fundraising is to pay for the essentials. We're talking airline tickets, lodging, maybe a couple meals, and any kind of supplies we need for as far as camera rentals, microphones, holding the vigils live on the street as we're doing interviews in London and DC. We're not asking for money from you guys to exploit Julian Assange or what's happening. We do this completely volunteering. We don't make any money doing this. So we are just trying to fund ourselves to go on location to do this. And because we would have to go on location and we can't do this from our homes, we do need some money to help with that. And we are really trying to still do this on a shoestring budget. We are not asking for a lot. There are 4 of us. 2 of us are going to go to DC. 2 of us are going to go to London. We have had to wait kind of to make sure that these hearing dates are really going to be the 24th. We were waiting till after the December case management hearings, and we're still just kind of waiting to book those things to be 100% sure we're going at the right time. And so things like plane tickets get expensive the closer you book them to the date you need to fly out. So yeah, we are really trying to be smart. We want to be transparent about all of our spending. So just know that you're donating to people that are very conscientious of the sacrifice it is to give people money. But we want to do this for you. We want to do this for our audience. We want to do this so other independent media says, well, shit, why the hell am I not covering it? Why am I not there? Why am I not in DC? Why am I not in London? You know, if the 4 of us who are just volunteers scattered across the US can pull together and do this, so can everybody else. And we need that independent media voice there in London, in DC. If you can't go to London and you're an independent media creator, come to DC with us. We have lots of stuff planned. We're going to march on the White House and the DOJ. We're going to go to Chelsea Manning's prison. We're going to go to Capitol Hill. Like, we need your voice wherever you can be to cover this. We need as much eyes and ears on this because, like Gordon said, the mainstream media might be there, but they're going to print and release the same bland, whitewashed version of this across the mainstream. I mean, they're not in this to educate people on how their rights are being violated, how free speech is being dismantled, how Julian Assange's human rights have been violated endlessly through this. They're not going to tell you about that. They're not going to tell you the smear campaign that's been going on since 2010 against him. They're not going to tell you how accurate WikiLeaks is and what information they've given to the world, information that they've given to the people to make more informed choices. The mainstream media is not going to tell you this. So that is why we are going to cover this hearing extensively and as much as we can afford and as much as our 4 bodies can let us do.
So to answer the question that Tariq had about us going forward as like activists, but also what we on the Vigil are trying to do, I think community news is really the only way to break this cycle of censorship, and that is getting local people together to share accurate national, international, state, and local news. So one of the goals for the Vigil in 2020 and beyond is to organize as town hall viewing parties for people. So that way local citizens can get together to talk about the issues that are happening locally and then have accurate information about national and international topics at the same time. It's hard to do because we do it late at night, but it is something that we're trying. But also for the greater scale of how do we come to this change? Like, how do we actually make the change with the information that we have? And I think it's just engaging in our communities and in our cities in the way that we would want the change to have happened. And what I mean by that is, if you're someone who's fighting for environmental rights, it's as important to go out and protest for it as it is to go and clean up the garbage that's along your rivers. If you're someone that's fighting for healthcare and for, let's just say, Medicare for all as an example, it's as important to go to your city council people and go to your city halls and fight for municipal banking so that way that healthcare can be provided at the most local level possible. So you don't have international war criminals with control over our healthcare, but rather it's funded through programs at your city that you have direct control over, and just different ideas like that from municipal banks, municipal broadband to guarantee net neutrality going forward. So that's just kind of the ideas that I had. It would be cool if you guys could spout out maybe a couple others that you'd like to see.
Yeah.
Well, just
I'll add to that if you don't mind. I would like to, blissful ignorance. It's not something that is going to help. blissful ignorance is not going to help. I and also part-timers are not welcome in this, because I mean, for instance, the reason I bring up that story is because I couldn't be down in London yesterday because I was sending myself nuts doing this. I couldn't be down in London, so I actually sent somebody to film and try and get close to Jeremy Corbyn and whatever if possible. Yeah, honestly, you can't get close to it. This is the what I got back. You cannot get close to them. It's almost like there's a military exercise around it, if you know what I mean. The fact that my mate Joe, who EF Press, I don't know whether you noticed, he managed to ask Jeremy Corbyn a question today. I retweeted it out. To go to him, he's on @EF Press on Twitter. My mate Jeremy and he asked Jeremy the question, and he wouldn't answer. It was very much similar to Dak and Christie and whoever he was asking with. I think he asked Bernie Sanders. It was a very similar sort of non-verbal answer walking off. It's on my Twitter, you'll see it. Part-time activist. Anyway, the reason I tell that story is because there was my fiance was down at the Stop the Wall rally doing that filming yesterday, and somebody turned up. Somebody honestly turned up, had a back to the camera, picked up a dog, did a picture, #Stop the War, walked off. That was it. She got there, took a picture, hashtagged it, walk off. That was it. She just, all this is to say that she was there. That is a part-time activist. That's somebody who is not going to help whatsoever. We have to get involved in this, all of us do. It's our duty. Humanity is at stake here. I can't stress that enough. Democracy and humanity. This is democracy on trial, if I'm right. Journalism in jail. And you know what? It's heartbreaking to me that the person that's in jail right now with democracy on trial and journalism on trial is, in my opinion, the most perfect journalist and journalistic outlet that has ever been. And I really wish that some of those shitheads in the mainstream media were rotting in Belmarsh prison right now rather than him. But of course, it's because he is stronger than them, and he's making a stand here for all of us. And I think that's something we all need to know. I'm not sure whether I'm very, very tired, people. You carry on.
I wanted to make a point to what you said about how hard it is to get to Corbyn. What I've noticed now that I've gotten to participate in Dak's work and actually get to ask the candidates is there is seeming to be this sort of maybe background collective of how these candidates are going to answer this question, because they are all starting to say a very scripted answer to him and to me now that I've gotten a chance to ask one myself. So when you say that there is sort of this, I don't know, this background campaign of convincing these politicians what to say, what's the safe answer to say so that their supporters just, turn the other way and say, well, they don't know enough about it, so they're not going to speak on it. I agree with you. And I was kind of shocked at Corbyn's just turned and walked away after he had been previously, at least on social media, willing to say something. So there is a concerted effort going on here. And this is being talked about. These politicians do know what's happening, and they are refusing to answer.
For U.S. politics, the intelligence agencies, aside from getting positions within parties and things like that, they use what's called their version of think tanks, which is essentially they run ideas and lines through social media algorithms and through phone banking to get a list of words that are okay to say, trigger words, buzzwords that they just continually repeat. In the political sphere, they're called the campaign advisors. That's generally what you see them listed as like financial expenditures. But it is a multi-million-dollar industry to figure out what words exactly to say, when to say them, and how to say them for U.S. politicians. So there is a literal industry built around making sure you can say the right thing to get elected.
Just to kind of build on your point, what you were saying about what can be done, I think I think all of the issues, Assange, so many different things, they kind of relate back to one thing, and it's something that America's really not taken care of, and that's essentially the idea of money in politics, because it's linked to the opioid crisis, it's linked to all these illegal wars. It's essentially, you now, as Sheldon Wallen calls it, I believe, the guy that Christopher Hedges always quotes, is that what you have now in America is an inverted totalitarianism. Instead of kind of a Stalin or a Hitler at the top, you've got kind of all these faceless corporations, and this has been scientifically shown that they have 99%. If the companies want something as legislation, it will very quickly become legislation. There's some things that 60-70% of the United States will want into law, but it will still not pass if it doesn't go with what the companies say. So I think going forward as well, another building branch to go off is only support candidates in 2020 that make pledges to get money out of politics. Because the whole issue with the Middle East, for example, is only occurring because military contractors make money by taking Syria's oil or taking Iraq's oil, making a mistake of there is no other real reason that they're there other than for corporate interests. And just for the record, I'm not saying that as someone that's anti-capitalist. Maybe I was in my younger days, but I'm not someone that's against capitalism. And I still think that.
So, something you brought up that I thought was a really not cool idea, but a great concept is the inverted totalitarianism, because that is what we're living under, is simply the power of the state being veiled in whatever leader the state puts up as the illusion. And what we're seeing is them trying to build, at least one of the parties trying to build the narrative of standard totalitarianism, where you have the orange man bad is the only problem, and all we have to do is get rid of him because he's akin to Hitler and the Nazis, and the problem will go away. And that's something that Obama did a great job of doing, was coming in, riding on the waves of all of the anti-war protesters and all of the climate protesters and environmental protesters back in 2008, and then shut it all down. Because he was into power, he was going to listen, we didn't need people in the streets, and used the essentially ability to manipulate society into thinking that there is one bad guy, and once he's defeated, everything's okay again.
You know what? There's still very much of that too. I saw this at the No War with Iran protest in LA when I was covering that. There was a lot of anti-Trump messages being spread there. I understand that essentially it is his administration that has, launched these attacks. However, when I was questioned about who is to blame for this, I ultimately said it's really the intelligence community. This is much bigger than Trump. And that's just an example of what Andrew was getting at. That's a very specific example, but we're still seeing this, that there is a whole other operation kind of going on behind the scenes, people whose faces we don't know. We don't know their names. We don't vote them into office. We can't vote them out of office. They're aware of that, and they abuse that power. And I often, reference that when talking about the 1 versus 5i campaign. But it's very much the same thing. And unfortunately, we can put pressure on the candidates, and it's good to do that when it comes to Julian Assange. However, that's not necessarily the answer. That's one component to this fight, but there are other components to this, and we've spoken about this before on the Vigils. I know my co-hosts pretty much agree with me on that. What about, I know you guys are not Americans, so you're not as invested in our political system, but what is your perspective on what I just said, that it's more than just holding the candidates to account? And this is for Gordon and Tariq, either one of you.
Yeah, I'll jump in there if you want, Taylor. We have to, from what I can see going forward, if what I'm saying is right, okay, if what I'm saying is right, those of you, if you're in the chat and you're not understanding what I've said, My opinion is that Julian Assange is a conscientious objectioner to the information war that we are in and have been in for quite some time. Okay? If this is the case, and the media is allowed to do its thing while this goes on, or allowed to do its thing so this gets swept under the rug and moved over into America and tried in the secret court where these extra charges get pushed on and whatever. We have to first make sure that no other charges can be unsealed. That is damn sure. And his lawyers, I'm sure, are on top of that. I'm sure they are. And they're obviously far more legal-minded than me. But as activists, we all have different skills. Some people, you know, whatever you do, whatever you can do, whatever you do well, whatever you enjoy doing, this is something that you really can't help it. If you value democracy, if you value free speech, if you value freedom of the press, if you value transparency, if you value true, honest reporting that gives you facts instead of just smears and slander and innuendo and racist rhetoric and just horrible, the nasty person, bad man, orange Trump. We've got to avoid that because the campaign to keep him, the campaign to keep him and democracy and freedom of the press, it must be diverse and it must be above board and sensible as well, because this would be a serious issue, especially if we are in a war where they are using information against us, and not just against us as people, but also against the state, trying to rile people up and what have you. For years, we've been doing these tactics abroad, remember, elsewhere. So we also have to, I think, accept, just accept our countries in the name of whatever. And sometimes people have done the wrong thing. We have to accept that, you know what, our countries have bad things in the name of capitalism and protection and whatever. There's some bad fucking people out there, but that does not mean that every person associated with an institution or whatever doesn't mean everybody's bad. So if they bring up some information against the BBC, for instance, and some person at the BBC was involved or whatever and did a bad thing. Just because that person did a bad thing, that doesn't mean that everybody should hate the BBC. Everybody should hate the BBC because I tell them to. That's why. No, everybody should hate the BBC for the reasons I hate and I document. But that we've got to be able to separate the fact that, you know what, sometimes things happen. And we have to be able to realise that what's happened in our history has happened. We can't whitewash it either, because if we start whitewashing history like the media do, then you know what? We get into a situation where our democracies have been fucking stolen and we haven't got a fourth estate. And that's what we're in right now. Without a working fourth estate, democracy cannot survive. Jeremy Corbyn said that at the stand, or rather Diane Abbott did, and then he tweeted something out. They said very little. It's very strange, isn't it? It's almost like my theory is correct. We've got a lot of responsibility going forward, guys, a lot of work to do. And I just really appreciate that you're working hard and you're all in it, you're doing it for the right reasons, and you've got your facts straight. Please, in the chat, I'll tweet it out, I'll put it in the chat again in the live chat on my stream, so you've got the GoFundMe. There you go, I've just put it in the chat, so there's the GoFundMe. Please donate for them. We need these people to come over here. And this sofa here is very, very small, so we need to probably try and get them some money to get some accommodation. And plus, I fart a lot. Well, it's not me, it's the Beyonce, actually. They won't appreciate being here. But we've got to get them here. We've got to get them here telling the truth and doing the right thing and standing up for all of us, the truth, instead of some, I don't know, hidden agenda because you work for the frigging Guardian and somebody told you to do a hit piece. Hopefully, that wasn't too long of a rant.
I do want to just take this moment and say that we have hit our halfway point. I want to thank Glory, Carolyn, Tony, and Mia, who just made some donations just recently. So yeah, please keep sharing the link. Please donate if you can and you haven't. We are halfway to our goal, and that, you know, gets us to London and gets us to DC. So please, please share the link. And thank you so much to those who've donated today, and thank you to everybody who's donated so far. We truly appreciate each and every donation, no matter how big it is.
Could I just add as well, Tariq had a job, people. He had a job, a paying job at Newsweek, okay? Please show your support to him. I know from experience, when you just starting out and you're just cast aside and you haven't got an employer and you're doing this, it's fucking hard work. So Tariq, please send me your Patreon link and I'll tweet it out. Please go and support Tariq. And he needs our help, guys. He really does. Telling the truth does not pay. It really doesn't. And neither should it. Neither should it.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. So Tariq, a lot of the things that we talk about here, a big problem is that there's just an utter lack of accountability. What do you think are some ways that we could have accountability for the things that have happened, as far as like crimes against our nation, as well as just our international crimes?
That's a really difficult question, I think. I mean, you need the first thing is obviously you need to have a good press. I think you guys have touched on that. And I mean, it sounds fairly obvious and maybe naive, but the people need to be educated. You know, people need to be taught the proper things in school and just to receive a good education in the first place. And yeah, I think also, you know, you need to put pressure on, you know, when we see wrongdoing see, this is the thing that I take this mentality with my journalism as well, is that, you know, sometimes I'll write a piece that's very critical of the US government or that's critical of the UK government, and I'll sometimes get criticized from, you know, people of those countries that say, oh, why are you criticizing the UK, or why are you criticizing the US? You know, we're the freest countries in the world. Why don't you go criticize Russia or China or whatever? My argument would be is that I can't influence the politics of China or Russia. They're not going to read my news reports. I can have somewhat of an influence here. And so it's always that mentality of always criticize yourself before criticizing others. But, you know, we have to start holding our own politicians to account. Sorry that I can't give much more of a, you know, solid thing to do, just kind of airy-fairy wish lists. But, you know, I think...
It was great, mate. It was great.
Well, look,
please, everybody, support Tariq if you can. We need honest people.
I can tell you
he was honest and he's paid for it.
I can tell you what I'm doing on a personal level that I think is hopefully going to make some changes very early on. I think we discussed this a little bit off the air before, but I want to start my own media organization and also kind of a foundation on top of that, you know, with a very strong emphasis on media ethics and building the infrastructure to make sure that, because what you get is a lot of, you know, take The Intercept, for example. They start off doing very great work and then they get infiltrated, and, you know, when money becomes involved, the politics of the publication will skew. So I want to build a publication that has a foundation and very strong groundwork of making sure it doesn't, you know, start to become corrupted. Having something that's not very done anymore, but having a very strong editor's code of conduct, and, you know, encouraging other organizations to sign on to the same code of conduct, having a complaints process, so where, you know, the code of conduct is broken, someone can make a complaint and that will be investigated, and the publication will be, you know, dealt with in an accordant way. So some of those ideas those are some of the things that I hope to have. And I think another thing in general in the, you know, everyone listening should try and take forward, I think one of my personal observation, one of the biggest problems in the West at the moment is the polarization. you know, if you are a whatever Bernie supporter, you absolutely cannot talk to a Trump supporter, from my perspective. Or if you're a Labour supporter here in the UK, you know, you cannot be seen dead talking to a Tory or a Conservative. And I think that is one of the most, I can't think of the right word, one of the most toxic things that's happening in our culture at the moment. We've completely forgotten that we are all people, and people's political views don't completely identify who that person is, and people can have, you know, views that are different to yours that are perfectly legitimate, even if you disagree. So I think, you know,
And Julian Assange actually is the starting point in political dialogue for most of the people, right? For the Trump supporters and for the Bernie supporters. Because you don't have the, oh, you let Trump win phenomenon that you have with like the Hillbots. When you talk about Julian Assange to a Bernie supporter, because you can have more of a conversation about 2016 and the rigged primaries. But literally, it's the thing that like blows a hole in the whole narrative. If you walk up to someone at a political event with a WikiLeaks shirt on and in a flyer that says, "Hey, did you know about Julian Assange's extradition hearing that's coming up?" Or, "Hey, did you know that Julian Assange is going to spend 175 years in prison for the crime of publishing U.S. war crimes?" No matter what side of the political spectrum or political field, aside from the hardcore neoliberal Democrats, you get well received, and it plants a question, especially in Trump supporters, because Julian Assange was supposed to be this person that Trump praised, that like Daddy Trump said thank you to. And now he's turned a blind eye on him. So if you have the conversation just about that extradition hearing and just about Julian's imprisonment with someone who supports Trump, you rattle that whole foundation that Raleigh is then built off of.
And of course, essentially, what we're all talking about is the First Amendment, you know, and it's the First Amendment for a reason. It's the most important amendment, you know. So it's one area that everyone can agree. Listen, whatever your political views are, freedom of speech is important. Publishing information in the public interest is important. People like Julian Assange, Snowden, Manning, Reality Winner, these people are, you know, all extremely important. I think we can start to have a conversation about that, hopefully across political lines.
This is something that I'd like to kind of circle back to a little bit, because you, Tariq, and Gordon both mentioned it in your responses to the last question. The division that we have, the identity that people speak to, the politics that makes the identity of the person. This is what I call manufactured confusion. Back in 1989, Chomsky wrote Manufacturing Consent. We have consent has been manufactured. If not by the time the ink was dry on the Patriot Act, certainly immediately after. What bad actors in the media, what the lack of a real fourth estate, what they do is they manufacture confusion. They force division on a populace, at least here in the States, that is not only responsive to predictive programming, but we're basically built on it culturally. There have been a number of studies done on the effects of media saturation in terms of predicting behavior. We have tech companies that exist to prove this and highlight it and send the data to either different corporations or to the government. Manufacturing confusion, and I know that when I watched you on George Galloway, Tariq, you made a point a number of times that you weren't trying to indict the entire media by coming forward with this story. The media has indicted itself. Like you responded nobly and correctly, in my opinion, to what was happening to you, to what did happen to you, and what went down with Newsweek. But in my opinion, from my observations, from what I've collected over 25 years of being active in both politics and journalism, the order of the day isn't necessarily let's present the information in a correct and responsible manner. It's we have discord to sow, and that's not something that the journalists themselves do.
Well, I mean, this is the thing that I guess I try to avoid the thinking of that, every journalist is one, the same thing. And also, I understand why people have this perspective of, journalists are kind of, sitting there plotting together. But genuinely, I've spent most of my, kind of adult life in newsrooms. And I'm saying this 100% honestly. Most journalists, go to their job thinking they're doing a good job. Some of them, a lot of them are my age, early 20s, late 20s. I'm 29, but we come into the industry. We have certain hopes and career aspirations, as all people do. And the thing that I'm trying to raise is that it's not just, there are obviously certain bad actors that try and influence things in certain ways. But in my experience, most people get in the trade with good intentions and they get manipulated. So I try and avoid the language of saying the whole industry, because first of all, journalists are never going to pay attention to that. They're never going to be like, if you go and say all of you people are like this and this is all the crap that you're doing, they have no real, because it's very easy to dismiss because they work in that industry. They know that they're not they do work hard. They do try and get the truth out most of the time. I think a much more nuanced approach is to say, you got, hold them more accountable, say, and put up, I mean, not to be self-bragging, but to say, look at what happened with this case of, Tariq, to say, and other people can do this. And, I showed people how to question your editor's judgment respectfully. And, I think we shouldn't just say, and it shouldn't be like a written off thing like this. The media is always going to be this corrupt thing. I think, it's much more, we've been doing that for 50 years. There's been books about how corrupt the media has been for so long. And nothing's changed. It's only really got worse. It's time to actually build infrastructure and have ideas of how to improve the media. We can complain about it all that we want and criticize the people. The people come and go. We don't have the same journalists that work now that did. They're part of a system that gets manipulated and the ideas get shifted. But it's just up to people to be intelligent about that and how to counteract it.
Tariq, you bring up a really good point now, and it's something that I've been thinking about as well. I am guilty of what you brought up there, saying the media and putting them all in one. I'm guilty of that all the time. I mean, Steve loves it when I shout at them. You should see him jump and shout and what have you, and he absolutely loves it. I am guilty of it. But the reason I'm so angry at them is this. Democracy is dying in darkness and they are turning out the lights intentionally. It's not like, if I figured this out, they know what's going on, and that goes to the heart of the problem with this. Because I said to Steve at my last vigil, and he jumped up and down and he screamed and he loved it because I went on a big rant and I ended it by saying this. Julian Assange is not in Belmarsh prison right now for something he did in 2010 or something he did in 2012 or 2014 or 2016. He's in prison right now for what he could be releasing right now. That's why he's in prison. That's why there's such a disinformation campaign around him. That's why there's so much bullshit in the media about him. That's why rape charges came up every 5 seconds in every article you could see. You had to keep going and complaining. You've got to retract that. That's untrue. there's a massive disinformation campaign. If I figured it out, they know it, and that is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. And we do tend to generalize a little bit more than is necessary, but the answer to your question, Tariq, like, well, how do we go about this? It's to become the media. We need to become the media. We need to be the responsible actors who are delivering accurate information in a way that people can digest and understand. Because traditional media, and I hate to paint it with a broad brush, but it's failed us. In the same manner that our isms have failed us, in the same manner that our belief in a meritocratic representative republic has failed us.
I mean, yeah, I think there's plenty of, this is the thing, there's lots of different reasons why certain truths will not get said in a newspaper. But I'm not saying this to kind of be disparaging of you all, but you know, I'm sure, and this is myself included, you know, if we're put in that position, say that we own a media publication and 80% of our revenue comes from one advertiser, and then one of your journalists comes up and says, hey, I've got this great story about, you know, this business down the street, you know, and it's our job to pay the salaries of 20 people or whatever it might be. And we know that, you know, whatever, Christmas coming up and they've got health bills and all this stuff. And this reporter comes up and says, I really think this is a public interest story about this company. You can understand why a certain editor might say, this is a good story, but, you know, at the end of the day, I have to pay the salaries of 20 people based, you know. And so these are the kinds of problems. And this is just one issue of, and that's, I'm sure there's more sinister things going on too. I'm not trying to,
yeah, no,
but
no, you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
On a foundational level, what you're trying to do with building your own essentially functioning fourth estate, and comparing it to that is essentially the fundamental principles that it's built on, and down to the funding structure. Because once you're a multinational corporation employing hundreds of thousands of people, you have too much of a vested interest in those people, like you pointed out. And having that core change where it's like people funding instead of based on advertising, it makes such a huge shift, because then you don't have that anymore.
Just to give you a little bit more information about that, actually. So instead of setting it up as a private company, I'm looking to set it up as a social enterprise. So it's like a company, you still try to make a profit, but like in my charter of what the business aims to do, it's like very explicit that this is for the kind of the social good, and all the funds will be done with that aim in mind. So that's, yeah, it's one of those things. And also, this is kind of a new trend at the moment of having a public editor. So it's kind of making the editor as answerable to the public as a politician. So having, you know, a structure in place where people can comment to the editor, and you know, they will kind of have to address the public, you know, once every 2 weeks or something, to answer about why they didn't write this story or why this was left out. Which is, to
give them a shout out, something cool too is crowdsource investigation. There's a guy out there who's been doing it for 20 years. His name's Corbett, James Corbett, CorbettReport.com. Mm-hmm. He has built and curated the best community of independent investigators and people like that. So maybe an idea like that too is straight crowdsourcing the investigative journalism, and then having those people essentially get a piece built out of their findings.
Mm-hmm. And also too, this reminds me of WikiLeaks in a way, because I believe that originally Assange intended for people to be able to edit information on the site, but that wasn't happening as frequently as he thought it would happen, sort of like what happens with Wikipedia, actually. And then also Assange, too, I think this isn't given enough attention at all, is he really advocated for scientific journalism. And what that means is that he said every or journalism should be treated as a science, and that every fact that's presented should be falsifiable, and there shouldn't be opinions, and that you should allow the viewers and the readers to make up their own mind. And if you look at the information from WikiLeaks in particular, there really isn't a spin on it at all. And I think we all noticed that when we were discussing the very first leak that they had published, where it was really up to, we studied it with a close eye, and it was really up to the reader to make up their own mind about what was published in there. But I think that's a great model to focus on, is to make sure that every fact that is presented can be falsifiable. I think it's a great model, and it's often not talked about in pro-Assange circles.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of point out a fun fact that Julian Assange started out as a scientist. He was a physics major in the university he attended. He also stopped going to university because he had a very young son and took care of his son before going back to school. And so as a person who has a science degree, that was one of the things I found so incredibly enlightening about Julian Assange, and was his theories on scientific journalism, and how that background information about him helped formulate his ideas on journalism and ultimately WikiLeaks. So yeah, despite all of the smears and the disinformation campaign, Julian Assange has an incredible background of helping people, of bringing internet access to disadvantaged communities in Australia. He helped police crack down on child porn rings. He has done some amazing work besides his work with WikiLeaks. And I think we ourselves talk a lot about the lies that are spread about him, and maybe we can help focus on the amazing things he has done in his life, albeit a short life, and hopefully a longer life. And, you know, like Gordon said, he is being imprisoned because, frankly, the establishment, the people behind the dark curtains are afraid of what he is capable of releasing and doing in the future. And I think a lot about what we could have as a world if Julian Assange had not been persecuted this last decade and restrained from really living out his full potential and doing his full potential in his work.
So something that we had talked about a little bit is the idea that we don't know our full history, that there's like a part of whatever is happening right now that has been able to be veiled and hidden, and that through some mechanism, essentially, that basically the media and elements of the media and different people and institutions have been able to convince us that the world is different than the way we see it. And so I thought that that was a really cool idea that Tariq brought up. So could you talk about that a little bit and maybe give like some examples of what is believed in the mainstream versus what you find to actually be true?
Well, I think, again, I have to make this clear that I love the United States, and I'm not saying this with any bad intentions, but you know, I studied in the US and in upstate New York, but and this is kind of a sloppy way of saying it, but excuse me for saying it this way. That's my disclaimers. But I think the kind of general attitude across the world is that there is this kind of sense of American superiority, of you know, Americans thinking that they're better than every other type of human, you know, in the kind of...
That is an accurate statement.
And so it kind of goes back to what we were saying before of, you know, if the... And I think it links back to World War II, where, you know, obviously America did a great thing for the world in kind of stepping in to help Europe. And after that, we had the establishment of the United Nations and everything. But I think, you know, that victory kind of solidified that mindset of, you know, we are the world's heroes. It's our responsibility to kind of step in and, you know, go and bring democracy to all these places. But what, you know, what's actually happened is that idea has been hijacked to do the exact opposite. You know, what you're seeing in Syria and Iran right now and Iraq, you know, did we bring democracy to any of those places, or did we just, you know, this is actually, and this is the funny thing about, we were talking about history. You know, I grew up in the Middle East. Syria was the safest, one of the safest countries in the Middle East. It had one of the best, it was one of the best countries for religious, forget the right word, like a religious openness. You know, you had the biggest diversity of different religions was probably in Syria. And then kind of in a couple of years, we were being told that it's one of the most evil dictatorships in the world. So yeah, it's kind of things like that of understanding the history of those places. Obviously, you can't understand the history of the whole world, you know, and you have to understand the history of your own country. But I guess even that is probably not very well known. I mean, how many people know that the United States has been constantly at war since World War II? There's not been a day, I think, that the United States has not been from World War II is straight into Korea, and then you had the Cold War, and you know, so I don't know how to.
I see what you mean, Tariq. I look at it, and it's almost like it's regime change wars for resources. That's the way I look at all.
Quickly point out as well, the UK is not any better, just to make it, you know.
I was literally just about to jump on your point, because wherever America has been in the world, what I am finding out more and more is whether we are officially there or not, we're usually there. I mean, for instance, in Yemen, I found out through other people's great reporting, and like I say, when I have a go at the media, it's not like there's not good reporting out there. There is. I found out through great reporting that in Yemen, for instance, when I first started thinking about it, the war in Yemen a couple of years ago, I found out that obviously the Saudi Arabians were bombing it, sometimes with F-35s made in America and supplied by America. The bombs were supplied by America and Raytheon and Arabia, but the pilots were trained in the RAF, in the RAF bases in the UK. In some cases, it has been alleged, I shall say, that British intelligence has been involved in picking out targets in Yemen and refueling planes, etc. We do this in conjunction with America to obviously give us a degree of separation in our proxy war in Yemen. Boris Johnson is even on tape saying, yeah, it's a proxy war in Yemen. That's essentially what's happening here. So whatever guilt is America is under here. I'm fully aware that the United Kingdom is no saint in all this, and actually I'm aware of the history more than most people, and I want to make this point over and over again. I fucking love my country, the same as you did, Tariq. It's such a good point that you made there. I love it. We've got fucking healthcare as well. That's how great our country is, you know. To all your band of Americans, we've got healthcare. I would not be here right now if it wasn't for our NHS. I would have been dead by the time I was 2. I know that for a fact. My fiance would not be here. The love of my life, she would not be here if it wasn't for our NHS. There are great things about our institutions. We have done wonderful things, and if you listen to historians, they will say, oh, we brought civilization to stages. We don't do all bad. We've just, we've got a bit of a problem. It's not just our problem. It's every country, I think, in the West problem and around the world. Capitalism, information, it can be powerful. And in the wrong hands, it can be leveraged. And we are looking at the information war at the moment, and we are in war. We have been exporting the playbook around the world. You've seen, I say we, our countries, for instance, have been trying to wage these regime change wars around the world for a long, long time. You've mentioned Syria. Not many people know about Libya, about the devastation we did in Libya. That was the richest country in Africa, and now there's slave markets in it. We have to take responsibility for this, but also I think we just have to okay, There are big decisions to make, and we have to be adults about this and look at it really carefully. We cannot just put a meme. I saw a meme. I just keep seeing memes that are just disgusting and racist, and they're there. And you know that they're there to make you go, whoa! Or they're there to make you feel empathy, or they're there to manipulate you. And they've got so much information on us, on our daily habits. They can literally augment our reality and change our thought processes. You know?
Everyone talks about like the simulation, right? To your point there, everyone talks about simulation theory, Gordon. But what really happens, like where the simulation exists, is in social media, like you're saying, because they have all of this information. And so they use it on such an individualized level that they can just basically destroy a person. And I've seen it happen with friends that are activists, that they just get targeted with what they know hits them hard, and it gets them to stop acting for 2 or 3 months simply because they can't emotionally handle what is happening when they're trying to communicate out what they're doing.
So I want to circle back to something that Tariq was talking about in terms of this concept of like American exceptionalism and how America has become the world's police since the end of World War II. Chomsky posits that our decline as the U.S. empire started after the end of World War II. And what we've seen since is we don't fight wars to win wars anymore. We get involved in wars to prolong them. And we're prolonging them at the request of and for the benefit of global military contractors, intelligence communities, in order to establish a global hegemony that, and as Andrew pointed out, is backed on natural resources of the countries that we invade and the blood that we spill on the ground in order to collect, you know, our prizes, our spoils of war.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think you're right. It's for the companies to keep making a profit and all that kind of thing. I think, and again, it goes back to what I was saying about empire is, and this kind of also relates to what you were saying, Andrew, or your question of some stories to be aware of. There's been a shift of what empire looks like now in what China's doing with the Belt and Road Initiative. So instead of trying to have a proxy government that's going to be running in your interests by, military overthrow, China's just giving them money for roads, infrastructure, hospitals, and saying, if we do these things for you, will you support our government? And that's working much more effectively than trying to, if you think about how long China's been doing this, it hasn't even been 10 years, and it's already got most of Asia on board with its plan, and many countries in Africa, some countries in Europe. America and the UK have been doing this regime change attempt to empire, and I can't think of a single place that it's actually worked out. There might be one, but I can't really think of any. But how many countries are now actually supporting this alliance between Russia and China? And obviously, they have some scary things from a kind of freedom of speech and human rights perspectives. But the messages that I'm hearing is that they want to go back to actually following international law and sovereignty of countries.
And something too about sovereignty and how authority works in international law. WikiLeaks is probably the best model for what an international institution should be. Because instead of saying, hey, we need authority to show you what's going on, and we need the ability to wage war or tell countries they're allowed, they just give people information and have people then have to decide what they want to do once they have that information. And I think that that's such a greater model than giving people that are on a quest for power the ability to govern an international body. So I think that sovereignty should play out mostly on the personal level, and then that's where responsibility then builds from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just to pick up on that point, I do happen to know that the government in the UK hold our sovereignty sort of in trust for us. This is why it's important that the people know the facts about Julian Assange in the UK. If they knew the facts about it, and we present the facts to them in the right way, they will come out in support of him. If people are subjected to propaganda and division through the media, as such that we have seen over the last few years, I don't think he's got a chance in hell. So we have to make sure that he gets a fair trial, and make sure that everybody knows that him getting a fair trial is not for him. Him getting a fair trial is for democracy to get a fair trial. We cannot let democracy die in darkness. And that's essentially what I think they're trying to do on the back end of whatever it is, whatever their motives. I don't care. That man asked me to save his life. I've done everything I possibly can do. I think I've made myself ill. I think I've made myself nuts. But you know what? If it's right, whatever. If I can cause a ripple in a pond, it will be worth it. We all need to fight that hard. I really appreciate all of you doing for as much as you have done. I really appreciate you all.
Gordon, can you explain maybe more in depth, if you have ideas, on how people in the UK can make sure he receives a fair trial? Because from our perspective, we hear about there being, 5 U.S. attorneys or whatever they are in the background that the judge is referring, the magistrate is referring to, that the lawyers are referring to. It seems very... Yeah, it seems very controlled by the U.S. in the actual UK courtrooms. So do you have any ideas, and Tariq, you can jump in too, on how the citizens in the UK can demand or ensure that Julian and all of us receive a fair trial?
The thing that I didn't catch all of your question, I think I got the gist of it there. What I was concentrating on last year was, I think, what Steve jumped in and said. Literally, you've got to get your elected officials involved in this. You have got to light a fire underneath their arse. And you know what? I will be lobbying politicians and trying to light fires underneath their arse. Now I think I've figured this out, because now we know, I think I know what they're up to. And if we can, that's a great thing, because now tactics wise, we can really, and you've got to get smart about this. And we cannot try and divide people. We just can't. This is about more than one man. This is not, we need to not make this about Julian. We don't. We need to make it about democracy, because that is what people really fucking care about. That's what they've been shouting for 3 years back here in the UK, that we want to take back our sovereignty and we want to take back democracy. You know what? That Brexit referendum, people voted for democracy and they voted to take back their sovereignty. And if they voted for that, they'll be behind Julian Assange, because that's exactly what this case is about. So, going forward, we've got to be careful.
With all the talk about propaganda and everything, I think Brexit, especially for people in the US that don't really get what that means, the conversation that gets left out of the Mockingbird media is in regards to how a nation is allowed to make their laws and how a nation is allowed to use their money. Because that is to me, the biggest reason why I could see people supporting leaving the European Union, is because your local, state, and even federal officials are just puppeteers at that point. Like, they don't actually have the authority to rule the nation in a sovereign way, because there's such a backlog of regulations built by a literal coal investment company called the European Union. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think it's kind of part of what I was saying before about that left and right not being able to talk to each other. Everyone that voted to remain thinks that every single person that voted for Brexit is a racist because they want to leave the European Union. I think it's much more sophisticated than that, and I think actually a lot of people, even though I wanted to stay in the European Union just because, for traveling and just having, that access to all those countries, I think essentially, yeah, a lot of people were right about, and this is a very uncommon view for people on the left to take, but I think essentially a lot of people were right about Brexit and the fact that the UK had lost the ability to govern its own country, even though that came with, and by me saying that, I'm not supporting the governments that, might do racist things or whatever, but essentially, it's you are correct in saying that democracy was kind of failing. And I think we're seeing that everywhere, that actually globalization has kind of had a big effect on people. And they're kind of countries all over the world are sort of shrinking inwards instead of trying to become more globalized. You're seeing it, all over the world. It's not just all over the UK.
Well, I think a big part of that has been the merger of the corporation and the state, and the state ultimately serving the corporation's needs as opposed to the other way around. So that when you have countries that are being exploited through labor or through resource acquisition via war, and people who are, their country is responsible for perpetrating these wars, or the job outsourcing, the exploitation of labor in a different country, the natural impulse is to, recede, to try and tighten that up at home. But the end result, almost always, in terms of politics, is getting a right-wing authoritarian strongman who spins it in a incredibly nationalistic, incredibly racist way, and it invokes a knee-jerk reaction from people on the left or even in the center to not want to be like that person or be associated with the people that are more outspokenly racist or nationalist in their view for, receding from the international scale.
An important point of these movements that we are involved in, whether that be for Susie Dawson's 1 versus 5i campaign, or the campaign, of course, to free Julian Assange that we're all a part of, it's really important, and it's something that we've really worked hard to do, is to not attach any sort of political ideology alongside of that, because we want to welcome people of various political viewpoints. Of course, there's a line to be drawn where you don't want to be associated with people who have hateful viewpoints. But generally, we want people on both sides of the political spectrum to be involved in this fight. And that's why we have always said, when it comes to candidates and politicians, we hold them all equally accountable, and we don't advocate for one over the other or endorse anybody. But we've been very vocal that Tulsi Gabbard, of course, is the only mainstream Democratic candidate to speak out in favor of Julian Assange, and promising to, I don't know if she promised, but she has said that she will free him, pardon him if he is in fact tried and convicted. So that's a really important point, is to welcome everybody. I know we have another guest who will be joining us. We're still waiting for her to jump on. Sometimes we have some technical issues. Zoom is not the easiest to work with at times, but while we're waiting for her to be joining us, again, I do want to remind you guys about our fundraiser, and also thank some of you guys who have, in fact, just donated today. I believe we've had 3 more donations. Christy, do you have those names up?
Yeah, I want to thank Laura and Courtney and Valerie, who just made 3 very big donations to us. Thank you so much. Please share the link. It is in the chat. It's on our Twitter page. We've been tweeting it out. Please tweet it out if you're on Twitter. Help us, drive up some sort of a tweet storm here. We really are looking to fundraise as much as we can today. We really want to start making plans, travel plans, commit and get those plane tickets reserved. And we really do need your help to do it.
Yeah, and again, we are very grateful for any donation and anybody who is willing to share the link. And also, in addition to that, do not forget, you can also support the other 3 independent journalists who are with us. Tariq Haddad, we have his Patreon account. We put it in the chat. I'm sure one of my co-hosts will put that in there again. Do support him because, again, he had the courage to stand up for the truth, and unfortunately that comes at a price oftentimes. And so do support him if you can, and we'll put that link in the chat. And then also, of course, Gordon Dimmack and my co-host Steve Poikonen of Slow News Day Show, both of whom have collaborated with today's event to stream it on their channels as well. So we're very thankful. Make sure you do help them out if you can, and help fund them, because it's not easy to be independent with journalism, but it's rewarding and it's the right thing to do, because again, like we were saying earlier, you are not having to adhere to the certain messages and political ideology of those who fund you, which could be some very powerful corporations. And I think that's a lot of times too why we see the media pushing for war, because they're backed by Raytheon, et cetera. And then also we know that war it boosts ratings, and that's been proven with the
leads,
stats.
Right?
Sorry,
I said if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
we are, at least cable news would just collapse in on itself if it didn't have a war to promote or a celebrity death to cover. Like, really, the only reason CNN is a thing is because of their coverage of the first Gulf War. Like, that's how they introduced themselves to the world. That's how they made their bones, was by getting people over to Iraq to repeat the State Department line and have, hour after hour of us blowing shit up, but never showing the true face of war, never showing the human casualties on the ground, never reporting on the depleted fucking uranium that we were peppering the Iraqis with for years. And basing that entire war on an utter lie, the incubator babies story. I just remembered recently talking to someone. I have an episode of Slow News Day with John Kiriakou, and it's titled Gulf Mines and Incubator Babies. John was in the White House while that young woman was delivering a very well-rehearsed and well-prepared fiction on incubator babies, and she was the Iraqi ambassador's daughter. Everyone in the White House knew that. And they're like, what the hell is going on? What are they doing here? They're selling war. When you see... I'm sorry. My train of thought just rattled when I got an air bubble in my throat. So somebody hop in, please, because I need...
Yeah, no problem, Steve. Hopefully you can still hear me. I've had to switch microphones. So I'm hoping you can still hear me.
Yeah, we still can. You're good. Your audio is fine.
Okay, great stuff. You touched on the cable news there, Steve. We grew up. I mean, I'm in my mid-40s now. Believe it or not, people. Yes, I know. I'm not old. I grew up with the cable news starting. I've seen its progression throughout my life. The first time we were introduced to cable news, it was Sky TV over here, owned by Murdoch, believe it or not. And Sky News were the first ones. The first Iraq War, Desert Storm, that was the first really cable televised news event. You know, they televised the invasion of Desert Storm. I remember watching it absolutely in awe of the whole thing and not having a fucking clue what was going on, really. None of us were. They were propagandized, you know. It was rah rah, the troops were doing good, we're bringing democracy to Iraq. You know, that's what we were told at the time. You remember. This wasn't what it turned out to be, of course. You know, the truth was something far, far greater. I mean, America was still there now. Now, you know, they've been trying since 1990 in my life, you know. They've been messing about in Iraq. So the cable news have almost survived off war. You know, anytime there's a disaster, that's where cable news really come into their own. But, I mean, I say come into the, apart from when that plane went down and was it Don Lemon started saying that, oh, was it in the Bermuda Triangle? You know, maybe it was that. The point is, I think the cable news needs to go away. And this plays into Trump's rhetoric as well. All of this that I've been talking about, it plays into Trump's rhetoric. We must remember that, because he's been saying for ages that they're fake news. He's right. They really are. The cable news, they're fake news. What we're seeing over here, you know, we're seeing disinformation, fake news right now on our own people. We're protecting ourselves, I'm sure, in the information war. I think that's what it is. We'll see going forward, but it's time the media have to take responsibility for what they have done here. They have to. Because without it, and if they're allowed to carry on the way they have, without rules and regulations and punishments for what they're doing at the moment, which is disgusting. Without that, I don't see a future. And Tariq's great ideas, as wonderful as they are to build this new enterprise going forward, we won't have that. We won't have a media, mate. Democracy will have died in darkness. And if democracy dies in darkness, there's no need for a fourth estate. There's no need, because then all bets are off and you can just take the red pill and just decide, you know what, as long as I've got my Burger King, as long as I've got my steak and my beer and whatever, my unhealthy diet, anyway, I don't have to think about what goes on abroad to make me consume this way. It's a big question. It's a big question for humanity. And you know what? I think it's Julian Assange who's got us there. He's a pretty special guy, if you ask me. Certainly worth fighting for.
Yeah, so at this time, right now, we are going to play for you guys the top 10 leaks from WikiLeaks. It's a video. It's pretty well done. I believe the four of us have seen this. So we are going to pull that up for you guys to show that. We are still waiting on our other guest. So yes, we are going to be playing this, and then we will discuss this, because of course what's equally important when talking about Julian Assange and the assault on the First Amendment that we're seeing through his case is to talk about his contributions to society, and specifically what we have learned as a result of WikiLeaks. And I would encourage everybody watching also to take it a step further and think about how much we wouldn't know if we didn't have WikiLeaks. We would not have any of this information. It is so important to support not only Assange, but also WikiLeaks as well, which again is a nonprofit organization. So we have the video up and ready to go. Thank you so much, Steve. This is a really good video. I think you all will really enjoy this.
Welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
A decade ago, we knew a lot less about the world's powerful leaders and institutions. We knew only what they wanted us to know.
Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
We didn't know how casually they broke the law or stitched up trade deals, how routinely they conducted mass surveillance or kidnapped, indefinitely detained, tortured, or even murdered people. But then,
the whistleblowing website
WikiLeaks is getting ready for a bombshell.
WikiLeaks? Julian Assange?
The guy ought to be, and I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, the only one to do it, illegally shoot the son of a
WikiLeaks.
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 I think the man is a high-tech terrorist.
Julian Assange founded WikiLeaks, a media organization unlike any other. In 1 decade, WikiLeaks has published more secret documents than all the rest of the world's media combined. WikiLeaks has published more than 10 million documents, more than 10 billion words. If you print them out, they would reach the center of the earth and then come out the other side. To celebrate WikiLeaks' birthday, here are the top 10 greatest hits, 10 publications that helped us all better understand the world we live in. In 2007, WikiLeaks showed us inside Guantanamo Bay by publishing the manuals and standard operating procedures used to hide prisoners from the Red Cross, as well as PR guides used to eliminate certain words like suicide or to rename a hunger strike as voluntary fasting. 500,000 documents make up the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, the most detailed description of war to have ever been published. Each attack and death is listed, including 15,000 kills that had been kept secret from the public. When European oil company Trafigura dumped illegal toxic chemicals in the Ivory Coast, it convinced a British court to gag the BBC and The Guardian. WikiLeaks published the gag documents breaking the censorship ban. In 2010, WikiLeaks revealed how a US Apache helicopter killed 18 people, including 2 journalists and people in a van driving children to school. What shocked the world was the video game commentary of soldiers eager to kill.
Look at that, right through the windshield. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice.
The children from the van were severely injured in the attack. Their father and the other adults in the van were killed.
The United States strongly condemns the illegal disclosure of classified information.
Later that year, WikiLeaks released over 250,000 secret US diplomatic cables about every country in the world. Cablegate exposed wrongdoing on every continent. WikiLeaks exposed the largest international agreements that the world has ever seen, the 3 big T's, which are being negotiated in secret. The 3 big T's are big businesses' new strategy to bypass the World Trade Organization and ensure that they get to set the international rules of what other countries can and cannot do.
Today, WikiLeaks begins its release of emails documenting the private lives and private lies of private spies.
WikiLeaks revealed the inner workings of private intelligence company Stratfor that provides advice to US government agencies, arms companies, and Dow Chemical, who hired Stratfor to spy on the victims of the largest chemical disaster in history caused by their plant in Bhopal, India. With the 2.3 million emails published in the Syria files, including the emails of its head of state Bashar al-Assad, WikiLeaks revealed the true nature of the Syrian elite. The Syria files also shed light on how Western companies profited from Syria by breaching sanctions. WikiLeaks revealed the US National Security Agency's spying on world leaders, including Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany and the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, the last 3 French presidents, and President Berlusconi of Italy. Finally, coming in at number 10 are the emails of the US Democratic National Committee, which showed how the DNC undemocratically and illicitly stacked the deck against Bernie Sanders. As a result of those leaks, the DNC's 5 top heads rolled. For the 10 million documents published, and the 10 million more to come, let us all wish WikiLeaks a happy 10th birthday. To help WikiLeaks publish the next 10 million documents, go to wikileaks.org/donate.
Anyway, welcome to the State Department. I think we have some intern.
God damn it. There we go.
So pretty good video there outlining the top 10 leaks that come from WikiLeaks. I'll open it up to our guests in the panel. I know we've talked about it before, our favorite leaks in particular. But before we discuss that video, we are now joined by our second guest of today's Vigil. Emmy B joins us now. Emmy is an activist in London and a member of the Committee to Defend Julian Assange. Emmy, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind invitation.
Absolutely. We're really happy to have you here joining us. Did you have a chance to watch that video, or did you just jump on?
I have just jumped on. I had a phone call.
Okay, so we were, this video basically was talking about the top 10 WikiLeaks to come from the organization, of course, because when we're talking about Julian Assange, it's also important to discuss the work in detail because we have learned so much, of course, and it's always important to remember how much we wouldn't know if we didn't have this check on power. So in your perspective, can you talk maybe about how you got involved in this movement in particular and why it is so important to support Julian Assange?
Well, my involvement started, my interest for WikiLeaks started in 2010. Myself and my family were against the Iraq War. We didn't agree that it was happening, and the collateral murder video attracted our attention. So, like with the rest of the world, I watched collateral murder video, and I was very moved. But that was in April 2010. It was a very busy time of my life, having at that time a very young child. So I soon went back into my normal routine, but in September of that year, when Julian Assange was again in the news and allegations against him were made from Sweden, it was all over the newspapers. I took that attracted my attention to find out why is this man being treated in this way. He had just released with WikiLeaks the Afghanistan war logs that August, which had just passed, which again, I was following the case from afar. And then very soon I started following the case and was very excited about the WikiLeaks revelations. October that year, it was the Iraq war logs. It made huge sensational news here in the UK, all these revelations, and then followed by November with the production of Cablegate. 100,000 diplomatic cables, by which time my attention was very engaged because I was interested in politics and I was extremely keen to see what revelations would come up from my country. I originally come from Greece, and also the relevance of all of this with his fate, because at the same time his legal troubles already started. So over the years, I started looking at the material, following the fate of Julian Assange. And as the years went by, I became more knowledgeable, more interested in their work. I understood the importance of the revelations brought for the improvement of our democracies here in the UK and around the globe. I understood, I watched a lot of the videos online that he spoke and some of his colleagues spoke about the role of WikiLeaks. And I got very, very enthused with their version of putting together an online library. This very exciting, easy to read original documents, in particular Cablegate, which took a whole year for that release to come through, is a fantastic, very easy to read encyclopedia in the world of international politics, because the United States have US embassies all over the world. US diplomats are doing an excellent job reporting both local news, but also the behind-the-scenes deals with international governments. And whoever is interested in politics and how politics work internationally can have a wonderful time reading through these cables. Each cable is like an article. And of course, to see how this information is projected internationally by the mainstream media. So I was caught, my attention was caught, and I started really going into detail and volunteering online and later on in the streets in activism in support of this man. Because I'm based in the UK, it was I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just WikiLeaks which drew me into this, but also the fate of this man, because very, very soon afterwards, he went into prison for 10 days in isolation, which was shocking to me. Then later on, we had the whole extradition case. So I started getting to following the case, understand the law in this country, which I'm not familiar with. So a lot of lessons, a lot of interesting things to get involved with and improve your understanding as a citizen, as a human being. And year after year, I got won over by Julian Assange, hearts and mind, because you see someone with tremendous courage taking on a very, very powerful adversary who persecutes him and his organization in a tremendous censorship effort that reveals a fear, a tremendous fear that this powerful government, the United States government, has towards the free flow of important information about the world, both about what they do and how they behave. Not just them, but also their partners. And in through all those years, WikiLeaks have revealed war crimes, have revealed corruption, and their work has continued beyond any expectation and despite the troubles of Julian Assange. Where do we find ourselves after almost 10 years, 9 years complete? I find myself in a place where I feel that it's important I contribute. And I have found similarly minded people here in the UK, where we joined forces and we try to see how we can assist with a grassroots solidarity campaign, which has been going on now for many years. It has intensified since April. And I'm glad to say that we've got very good results. People in this country finally waking up to the threat to press freedom and freedom of expression that his case presents, with a very, very strict extradition request from the US. And if the courts here and the political world here stands by and let this man be dragged in a supermax prison in the US, who is going to be next? Because Julian Assange finds himself in trouble purely because of his work with WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks.org continues to operate. If Julian Assange is shipped to America, are they going to stop there? No, I don't think so. They will want to close the website down, which is the very, very target from the very beginning. So who's going to be next? Kristen Hrafnsson? Sarah Harrison? Any other of the WikiLeaks staff? And after they finish their job there, who is going to be the next target? All the precedents will have taken place legally and politically. We need to resist this extradition. We need to resist it because it is right to do so for Julian Assange, but it is also right to do so for our own democratic rights. The Department of Justice in America is challenging the First Amendment of the US Constitution in America. And you've got over there in the States a huge battle in your hands if this extradition is allowed to take place.
Emmy, I just want to express that, and I think I can speak for all my co-hosts, that you have been an inspiration to all of us and to every new activist that comes on board to the Free Assange movement. You are someone that we look up to and has continually inspired us with your work. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, because you are there on the ground and you have actually, I think, been able to go into one of the hearings as well. What are you seeing? What are you seeing that, in your opinion, is violating the rule of law in the UK? And what are you seeing at these hearings, whether it's outside or inside, that is totally uncharacteristic of the UK justice system?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for your words. They're very, very kind. But also, let's not forget, I'm not alone here. I would never, ever have been able to carry on with this work if I didn't have some wonderful, wonderful people right next to me, literally, on the streets. And people who have themselves very strong human rights beliefs, often have found themselves in this country as a result of political asylum themselves, or they've experienced a persecution abroad. Because let's face it, outside the Ecuadorian embassy at number 3 Hans Crescent, it was a mostly Latin American people and Greek or other people who would stand there in solidarity, people who come from countries who've experienced political turmoil and inspired, they're very clear in their mind about how precious democracy is and how quickly we can lose our human rights, we can lose our civil rights, we can lose democracy if we are not prepared to just do something, no more, no less than what we can do, each of us in a different way, according to our capability, according to our wishes, and in that way, if you keep it real, you can go long-term supporting and develop yourself and learn from the experience. So I've had some wonderful people here in the UK alongside me, but you know me because, of course, I'm also online, and that's why it becomes, I've become known, and that's the only reason. But I've got a lovely people here helping out. Now, let me explain where we are now. Since his arrest, we as activists, solidarity activists, knew exactly what to do. We were just going to follow him. So we followed him. We followed him at Belmarsh prison. I have never been in the premises of the prison before. It is a very cruel place, very, very huge concrete walls in the middle of nowhere, very isolated place, difficult to get to. It's a human tragedy accumulated. It's not a place you would wish to visit, but we go, and there is a local group doing solidarity vigils there every Saturday, and we go periodically in larger numbers and have events there. Try to raise our voice as loud as we can so we can hear us, and he can hear us because we hear sometimes from his dad when he's visited or other people who visited that yes, he can hear our voices, and this is important. We're always peaceful, but in the same way that you have seen us with posters and banners, and now we have a sound system. Due to the generosity of many of my Twitter friends, we got ourselves a sound system, and we give it a good go, Sometimes musicians come with us. We write letters. We met the governor of the prison. It's a very difficult situation. Very difficult situation. We are learning about the prison system. We didn't know before. Letters are written. We read the responses. We write again. A lot of the letters we receive back from the prison are standard letters. You can imagine the civil servant typing on their computer. They're not talking to us about Julian Assange. They are talking about a standard reply that they would send to anyone sending asking questions about a prisoner. They often do not recognize that Julian Assange is a prisoner on remand. That means he's an innocent man. He's purely held in anticipation of his extradition hearing. There are no charges against him in Sweden, never have been. He has served his sentence. Some people keep forgetting that although he was sentenced to 50 weeks in prison at the Crown Court on the 1st of May this year, actually, he only serves half of that. That is the law. If you have a sentence which is less than a year, you only serve half of it. So he's actually served his sentence on the 23rd of September. He should have walked free from that prison. So since then, he's been held purely on remand, as they say, awaiting his extradition hearing. That's highly irregular. We are talking about someone who is not a dangerous criminal. He's not a criminal at all. He's an innocent man. He's a publisher. He should never be in prison. And considering his difficulties with his health, both mental and physical, really the best place for him would have been at a university hospital, just like the many medical doctors who have signed an open letter requesting exactly that. So we learn about the prison system, we learn about the conditions of his life inside Belmarsh, and we feel for this man. We write letters, we go in solidarity outside, And then when he goes to courts, we follow him in solidarity, both outside the court and inside the court. Now, over the court system, we have found tremendous resistance by the legal process, impeding our access to an open court. And they're doing so logistically. On the first occasion, on one occasion, they closed the court to the public, so there was no public allowed to enter the court hearing. But mostly what they do is they restrict the number of people that can actually attend. I mean, we are talking about the most important press freedom, freedom of expression.
Emmy. Hi, Emmy.
Hi.
I love you. I love you so much. You have no idea. It's almost like there's a veil of secrecy around it, and really, we haven't been told what everything's really about yet, isn't it?
It seems like what we see is not what's happening. You're right.
Yes. And do you remember? I remember interviewing somebody. I remember somebody saying, I think it was I think you were in that one. And you saw the proceedings. I remember somebody telling me, Emma, was it Emma Arbuthnot? I think it might have been. But she turned to the Americans and she said, "It's almost like you've got a schedule to keep." Do you remember? She said something like that. It's what is happening in that courtroom is not really what this is all about. That's the thing, and this is what I've been talking about tonight. And there's a lot of evidence to back this up. They tried to pull the wool over people's eyes, and they've tried desperately to pull a big old fatty, as I used to say. And you know what? People have figured out that this man, it's not just a man. You can't think of it as Julian Assange in prison being tortured. You can't. This is democracy on trial. That's what this is about, and they know it. And Julian Assange knows it. And you know what? Now I do, I think, and now everybody else needs to get on the same page. This is because of secrets he could be talking about right now. For instance, I saw a video with him the other day, and John Pilger was in it. Somebody linked me to it, and they were talking about the TPP. And what's the other one in America, guys, that you hate? There's the TPP and the
TTIP. Transatlantic,
transatlantic, whatever it's called. Well, there's another link, isn't there? There's another major trade deal that they are talking about with America, aren't they? And is it called the TTIP, something like that? And there are some very intelligent people like John Pilger who are looking in the area as if to say that this is actually the NHS. That's what he's looking at. So these are all things. These are all things that are connected. Julian Assange is key to them all, and that's what this trial is all about. We cannot let this happen in secret. It has to be out in the open. This is our democracy.
We've got about 5 or so minutes left with Tariq. There was something I wanted to ask you earlier on, and we got off onto a different subject. But Newsweek hasn't infrequently reported on Julian Assange, at least in the London office where you were until you resigned because you have character and a moral compass. Were there conversations in the newsroom about Julian Assange? What was the sense from? Do you have any kind of sense of what the overall feeling about the situation was? And you know, you don't have to like name any names or anything, but just kind of a general idea.
Well, I think most people have bought into the propaganda or the smears that even if, you know, this is the thing that I've been trying to say is that I think actually journalists aren't aware of the propaganda, because if I mentioned his name, people will automatically say, oh, but what about, you know, this, or what about the rape case, or, oh, you know, it kind of, there's a cloud of uncertainty around who he is as a person. The only kind of solid example that I can give you is that I did kind of similar to what I was going through with the Syria thing. I did tell my editors actually about 3 weeks before I resigned, saying, "Oh, I've spoken to Julian Assange's lawyers because I've thought, this is one of the most important news stories of 2019 and 2020." I did tell them, that I've got these great quotes, from the lawyers, and got this, these documents and stuff. There didn't seem to be any particular interest in getting those published. There wasn't like any great reaction of, "Oh, this is great, we should print that immediately," even though it would have been an exclusive story on Julian Assange. It was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I think, there seems to be a kind of a effort to not really discuss it. I think what the newspapers are doing at the moment in the West is they'll cover the story as much as they have to. When there's a court hearing, they'll give you the basics of it, but they're not really going to go beyond that. Like you said, I'm going to have to shoot off very quickly, so I'll give you my final thoughts.
Yeah, Tariq, I want to thank you on behalf of all of my co-hosts as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be joining us. We really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And also for everybody watching, this is somebody who has a tremendous amount of courage. It was probably not easy for you to resign from your position, but know that you have so much respect for making that tough decision. But yeah, before you do head out, please give some final comments, and then also let everybody know where they can find you on social media, and also how they can support you in your work. And thank you once again, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in London.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all. Been nice chatting to you. The final thing I was going to say is that, when people, this is maybe a childish thing, but when people often talk about the Nazis, the kind of knee-jerk reaction is to say, they were so evil, how could they have ever done that, And it sounds like a controversial thing to say, but I think what we need to understand is, or what we need to say to ourselves is, that the Nazis or the Germans or whoever committed atrocious crimes, they are no different than all of us. We are Nazis, we are racist, and that's a difficult thing to say, but it's the understanding is that we have the capability to do evil things. And the truth that came out of what happened in Nazi Germany is that the only way that Nazi Germany was allowed to get to the level of what it was, because people say, "Oh, they're monsters," and they put them in this other category. What we need to realize is the only way that Nazi Germany was allowed to happen was that enough people didn't speak honestly about what was going on. Too many people were scared of upsetting someone, losing their jobs. And I understand not everyone is in a position to speak out, but I think this is what I've been trying to say, is that, the truth is really a fundamentally important thing. And if we censor ourselves, if we keep quiet about the truth, the situation around us keeps getting worse to the point that it does reach Nazi Germany. And, all of a sudden you're in that moment, and you're committing these horrendous crimes, and you have no idea how you got there. The truth is that it takes a long time to get there, and we've already been down that path of not being honest enough. And some people might argue that the amount of crimes that the West have committed in the last 50 years, is probably reaching the levels of what was committed in World War II. If you think about Yemen, Syria, Iraq, dozens of countries in South America, the West have been perpetrating terrible crimes, and not enough people are speaking out about it. So my final message to people is, speak honestly about everything. Start off in your own life, start off in your own family situations, start off just with yourself, be honest with yourself about what you're doing in the world, and then we can kind of slowly extend that out. I think that's the only way forward for everyone. But
it's a great sentiment, that is, Tariq, and I really appreciate what you've done, and I really appreciate your insight as well into that, because it's really important. I'm a student of World War II, as I started this stream out by talking about. They could not believe what was being done in their name when they found out afterward. They was like, How did we not know? Well, you know, people get comfortable, you know, or people are happy with a really strong economy, or people are happy with national, whatever it is. It can be used to propagandize people, and people are just not aware of the decisions that go on outside their little comfy home. I'm sitting in a lovely comfy place right now with a flat screen TV that I can guarantee you was made in a sweatshop in China by 12-year-old children. Probably I've got sneakers that is the same. You know, we are all responsible for our actions, and it's going to take, I think, a massive change in the psyche of the West and the psyche of humanity to be able to cope with the move. If we're going to have a democracy, if democracy is the way forward, we have to have a fourth estate holding it account. Otherwise, we end up with what we've got at the moment, which is rampant corruption, rampant just consumerism, rampant war. It's just a country and countries that are built with economies that are based on the military industrial complex. And now, if we can have a democracy with a fourth estate that is going to show the true horror of what we do, and then we can make intelligent, informed decisions. That's the way forward. And I really appreciate you for what you've done and your insight today. Just thanks very much. Support Tariq on Patreon, everybody. Support independent media. Make Orwell fiction again.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and good luck. And I hope to see you in London when you guys come visit.
Are you coming to the court tomorrow?
Be in touch.
Yeah. So actually, maybe we'll have this conversation publicly. But so I know that there's a court hearing tomorrow, but I wasn't aware of is it a case management hearing, or is it a
very interesting question, because it was not in the court listings on Friday. So the court has not informed officially the press. We found out actually from the Don't Extradite Assange official campaign on Friday afternoon. I immediately ran up the court. They confirmed it is happening and he's appearing in person. Then they referred me. They could not answer if it was an administrative hearing or a case management hearing. That was the helpline at the courts. So they referred me to the International Jurisdictions Unit, which is the extradition unit. I rang them up, and after the lady putting the telephone down on the desk and having a big discussion with her colleagues of what answer to give me, she came back and she said case management hearing. But there is something very strange going on there. So I'd be trying to attend in the morning, making a nice early start if you wish to attend, because obviously there is great restrictions in access. The small court has got 13 seats for the public, another 10, perhaps 13 for the press. The large court can only hold 41 seats in the public gallery and probably about 20 for the press. This is inadequate, actually, not fit for purpose, but this is what we've got.
The disinformation campaign, it is, Emmy, it's the disinformation campaign, and it centers all around him.
Real quick,
even
Tariq,
down to the court proceeding.
Bounce. We'll continue this conversation. Tariq, thank you so much for being here. I remind the folks where they can find you, and I know you got to run. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Website is tariqhaddad.com, so TAREQHADDAD.com. Everything else should be on there: Twitter, Patreon. It's all there. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. And despite all of the negative things and the bleak times that we're seemingly in, I think things like this are an inspiration and a spark of hope to people. And where you're giving other people the opportunities and the inspiration to continue. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Tariq. So glad to have you on.
Thank you.
It was great to speak with him, everyone. That was Tariq Haddad, a journalist formerly with Newsweek. Do support him. Check out his work, and also follow him on Twitter at Tariq_Haddad. Haddad. So we will go back to what we were previously discussing. I believe it was you, Gordon, who was finishing up a comment.
Yeah, no, it's
I was.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
The guy looked
carry on, man.
incredibly polite, and we were stringing him out for about a half an hour over what he wanted. Figured I'd give the man an hour.
I'm really sorry. It's probably my fault. Guys, I'm really, really tired. And now I want to speak to Emmy, because Emmy, you sent me a couple of links, didn't you? Do you want to talk about those two things that you sent me that you have written about on Wars of in Action?
One, it's very, very important to keep our mind and our eyes focused on the case in Spain. UC Global, you have covered developments there. El País is the investigative newspaper that uncovered this scandal, and it was followed by Julian Assange doing, suing this company for what is being done to him. So the prosecutors there are investigating UC Global, and they have revealed that UC Global, which was the security company employed by the Ecuadorian state to guard the Ecuadorian embassy in London, was in fact also servicing the United States intelligence services, to the point where cameras of both video and audio were placed inside the Ecuadorian embassy on almost entire embassy rooms, common rooms as well as private rooms, filming Julian Assange and feeding the information directly to the CIA. So the case is in the courts, in the Spanish courts, and periodically we get updates from El País. But most importantly, last week we had a presentation at the Chaos Communications Congress in Leipzig. So a kind of a university for the technical world, with information about technical matters. And there was an amazing presentation by Andy Muller-Magoon, explaining to us in a very easy way, easy languages, beautiful slides, the extent of surveillance inside the embassy and outside. And because myself and others were outside the embassy for 6.5 years holding a solidarity vigil, we've actually witnessed things, and we're there when these things were happening, but obviously we didn't know they were happening or who was doing them. For example, he suggests, and with photographs he illustrates, that a laser microphone was used by the building at number 18 Hans Crescent, with which the United States intelligence services were attempting to record conversations inside the embassy using this laser microphone. I didn't know personally such a thing could exist. I'm not a technical person. I couldn't believe what I read. I looked it up a little bit. I asked my husband. He said, "Yes, of course. Didn't you know these things?"
Those propaganda films from Hollywood, they get their ideas from somewhere, Emmy.
But what we did see, Gordon, was that this particular flat always had its windows open, day and night.
I know exactly what you're talking. I know the window. You pointed it out to me many times. I could see where it was.
But I've got to tell you, we thought it was the UK intelligence services, MI6. Now we hear it's the CIA. So my question to the London mayor, who has the overall spending responsibility for the Metropolitan Police, is: did the Metropolitan Police of London collaborate with the CIA in the surveillance of that embassy?
And if so, that is again a crime, is it not? Is it, there are huge rules with regards to lawyer client privilege. This place also recorded visits with these doctors. You've got rights to privacy, or you should have, and that these things have been they've been circumvented and they've been broken, and they've done them to try and get at him. It's like Nils Melzer says, this is the collective persecution of many states to try and get at him. This is not something that they can sweep under the rug. The pages of history will condemn them if they do this, you know?
But
And this is the worry of it.
He's been telling the world. He's been telling the world all along. He's been talking. He's been writing the books about surveillance, and he's been telling the world and educating us at the same time. I doubt he was aware of the extent of what UC Global was doing. But as an intelligent man, he would have understood the stakes and the risks to his life. Harrowing the evidence that is coming through, the extent of data collection, even violating, you know, all sorts of decency with the way they were, you know, recording everything. It's inhuman, and it's wrong, and it's illegal.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
And we are waiting with great interest to see, but we're not just waiting, you know, with crossed fingers as if it is a show. We participate. This is our cause. This is important for us as citizens. We participate, and we try to do what we can. And so, being based in London, Greater London, I have written to my representative at the London Assembly, which is a team of 25 people, elected officials, elected politicians who are represented Londoners, who scrutinize the London mayor's spending, including the police spending. So I asked the questions to my representative, and he has now tabled 4 questions to the London mayor, including, was he aware that the CIA was collaborating and operating there? Was there an agreement between Metropolitan Police and CIA? We need to know these things. I have written to the London mayor myself. I've received replies. Was he lying to me when he was telling me the only reason they are holding him there, Julian Assange, was because of the European arrest warrant against him? Did he know what was going on?
Here's my worry. Here's my view on it, Emmy. Here's my view on it. My view is there are seldom people who are aware of truly what's going on. Very few. I have seen evidence of that with the when I spoke to my audience and asked my audience to send them letters, and they did, and they sent me the responses from the MPs, and it was response after response saying rape charges, saying Sweden, saying nonsense. So there are very few that know what is going on, and the ones that do know what is going on, you either don't want them anywhere near the levers of power, or they have no power whatsoever, and they're powerless to it because they've been bound by whatever party restrictions or whatever restrictions on them. That's how I view it. So we shouldn't condemn what I've learned. It's only very recently since I've got it organized in my head. But what I've learned is we need to be responsible, and we need to not condemn people for what has happened here, because what has happened is in the fucking name of national security, and I really do believe that. I really do believe it, and I totally agree. I don't agree with what they've done to Julian Assange, what have you, but if there has been an attack on the United Kingdom, an information war attack of a hybrid war of some sort, and the military have took over like in this way, I totally understand it. But he's at the center of it. That's what I'm saying. He's at the center of it. This is how important it is that we all make sure democracy does not die in darkness, and he has a fair chance in an open court for us all to see.
It's not patriotic for politicians to keep their mouths shut. It is not patriotic for politicians to mislead their voters. We rely on democracy to keep the politicians honest and for the best ideas of our society to go forward in managing our public affairs, as simple as that. We do not need the lies. We are all adults. We can read and write. They can tell us the truth.
Who will tell us the truth? Who will tell us? I brought up that. Somebody mentioned it in the chat. Was the TTIP? Who will tell us the truth about that TTIP? We've got suspicions and we've got people looking at it, but who will tell us the truth? These documents are leaked to them. That will tell. Oh, wait a minute! They really are selling off the NHS as we thought. Who will leak documents? I don't know about You hear the stories of the paedophile rings in Westminster. Who would release those documents? Would the Times release those documents, or would WikiLeaks? Where were you likely to see those documents? You know, this is what I want to really explain to people and explain to the activists as well. This is how you connect with people. And you say to them, do you want democracy? Yes. Well, you need a viable fourth estate holding power accountable that is uncorrupted. Which issue would you like to know most about at the moment? And whatever they say, just say, well, who's more likely to tell you about that? There's your answer. There's Julian Assange. Now, that's my idea of how to get people involved and how to get people on board. But other than that, I think I can... I just hope that people are responsible. And I hope that the next month, the next 2 months, the next months, as this plays out, people are responsible. We don't get the craziness that we have gotten for the last 2 years. And this disinformation thing needs to continue, because if I'm right, the fucking cat's out the bag now. You can stop pretending.
So something I think that we should...
Hopefully, that's the way forward.
I was going to say something I think we should do to the larger point of don't condemn these people. Our politicians, well, some of them should be condemned, but to the larger extent, the people that are genuinely good people that are just part of this system, I think something that we should do is be the media to them. Use our ability to contact them to share the news and information, not just our opinion of what's going on with it. So that may be literally just sending a physical letter, because you can't use the technology that was released in Vault 7, basically the ability to edit screens and edit pictures that people can see on their screen. So sending people physical letters of news articles saying, hey, this is what's going on with Julian, and sending them those on a regular basis. Whenever something comes out, print the paper out, put it in an envelope and mail it to your local official, mail it to your senator, or use something like ResistBot, which will send faxes for you to send that over to them. So that way they pick it up and hopefully will read it and then have the ability to actually govern based on the information that you're telling.
I want to kind of highlight a comment that came in through my chat, because I think it will provoke an interesting round of conversation, especially with people that we have with us right now. And it's didn't the Obama administration refrain from prosecution or going forward with the extradition charges because of the New York Times problem? And how are they getting around it with this administration? In my view, they don't care. The breakdown of the rule of law and the breakdown of the state is such that these actions become necessary in order to maintain a level of control. Gordon, it looks like you got to bounce. So why don't you...
I have. Thanks very much, guys. As you can probably see I'm knackered. I really am. I've broken myself on this. I really have. And I'm going to have to just try and collect my thoughts and not, because it's very easy to just go and shout into the screen. But you got to be adult about these things, and you got to write, okay, this is a collective responsibility that we all must take here to not lose our heads and to understand, right, we know what we got to do now. We know what they're doing. We've just got to show it. We've just got to prove, hey, we know what you're doing. Democracy cannot die in darkness here. It must see its day in court. And we know that this is about the fourth estate, and everything they have said points towards it as well. If you look at what they've said when Diane Abbott stood up in the Houses of Parliament, if you look at what Jeremy Corbyn tweeted out, they haven't said much, and I have gone nuts. Drove myself nuts as to why aren't they saying something? Well, this is why, folks. This is going to be the trial of the century. And buckle up, because we've got a lot of fucking work to do. And I really appreciate all the efforts that you've put in. I'm so tired. I need to get some sleep, because I'm going to be at the court tomorrow. I'm going to go down. Whether I get in there, I don't know. I'll see you there, Emmy. But I need some sleep, guys. I'm so tired. Thanks so much for all you do. Please, I just say to everybody, support independent media, because you are not getting the facts with regards to the most important case in the fucking world, possibly history, from the lying mainstream media, the old media, as I like to call them. Independent media is the way forward if we are to continue with a democracy, and that's what's at stake here. Thanks so much for your efforts, guys. I'm going to go and have a beer and sleep my ass off.
Gordon, thank you so much for collaborating with us, and we appreciate all of your work, your journalism, covering this case and doing a great job of it and really being a reliable source.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Make all war fiction again, guys. I know you're going to do it.
Thank you so much, Gordon.
May I jump in about the same question about Obama versus Trump?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It was the Obama administration that started the WikiLeaks grand jury. It was the Obama administration that condemned Chelsea Manning at her court-martial, 35 years. Yes, in the end, Obama, in his last month in office, commuted the sentence to 7 years, 7 and a bit. And it is the Trump administration that threw her back into jail in coercive measures to force her to testify at the WikiLeaks grand jury. She's resisting. She's an example to us all, for someone who stands by their principles. But to my mind, the Obama administration and the Trump administration have no difference other than the opportunity to prosecute Julian Assange. And the opportunity came with the change of the administration in Ecuador from the one of Rafael Correa to one Lenin Moreno. And that was the only difference, I believe, that with Lenin Moreno in government in Ecuador, the opportunity, the window of opportunity opened for any US administration to push forward with that agenda. The Obama administration prepared the ground for the next US administration, the Trump administration, to push forward. And I see no difference between them. I would urge the US public, I'm not an American, but for you guys, you have a huge task in your hands. This is your country, this is your First Amendment, but the consequences globally are tremendous because US is the #1 superpower. And in the West, where we all belong, is the country that sets the standards and the pace. And what we saw, crimes being committed in the foreign policy, is now turning inward amongst its allies and amongst its people. When they've committed crimes with impunity abroad, what will stop them from committing them inside the United States?
And to be exceptionally clear, we commit those crimes inside the United States already. We have the largest public prison population in the world for people that just chose to participate in putting something inside of their body and the economics that is then created from making it illegal in the first place, from using drugs. We also have millions of people in prison camps on the border. You have police that are now, or the military authorized to use lethal force against United States citizens in civil disturbances. You have the NDAA of 2012, which authorizes the removal of any citizen's rights, as well as their citizenship status without authorization, without approval. It can just be revoked at basically the FBI's discretion. So we are tear gassing Native Americans on their own land with water trucks full of tear gas mixed with water in freezing temperatures. Like, these crimes have been committed constantly against the American people. So I just want to put that out there, because at this point they're coming for journalism last. They've already devastated so many populations across the United States.
Not only that, but they've sown a level of division between the, you know, inside of the working class and the middle class that I don't know if we've ever experienced anything like that. And I will include the Civil War in that. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. If you go onto a college campus right now, if you don't check off the 18 different boxes that somebody identifies as, like yourself, you can't have a conversation with that person. Like, there's so many subgroups and some subsections of what it means to be you that you can only be walking around confused as fuck.
But here we are. Christy and Taylor and Andrew and yourself, here we are. We're doing our bit. That's all we can do at the moment. That's all we've got. But what we have, we can use. And if everybody does their bit, well, we're going to have a much better result at the end. I remain optimistic. As long as we live, we can do things and feel okay with ourselves. One alone cannot save the world. We need each other, and we need to work together if we can, because there is a powerful synergy when people come together. We've seen it again and again. This has been the great success of the West, and I'm very hopeful that things can improve. What we need is freedom of the press, freedom of speech, just like we talk today, accumulative across the way. And the internet has given us this opportunity. But just as Julian Assange has said in the past, the internet is always also quite dangerous. And the level of surveillance that has been going on, including against activists, as Susie Dawson is doing a wonderful series there and a wonderful work investigating and reporting on the Snowden revelations and the WikiLeaks revelations on this subject. We have a lot to learn. So keep it up, guys. I'm very grateful you've invited me, and we're doing our bit over here, and we're looking forward to meeting you in February when you come all the way from the States to cover the event. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to make it over there. I'm feeling very hopeful about it. We do need to have independent media covering that. Steve and myself are really dedicating to getting this right, and we're studying up very hard right now on extradition, that entire process, the defense that's being used. We are pretty well versed on the case, but of course we are really working hard for the viewers, so you guys are informed hour by hour and minute by minute. We will be communicating with Christy and Andrew while they are still stateside. So I do believe that we have enough. We want to talk about this most recent award that was given to Julian Assange. Steve, I believe you want to pull up that article for us.
Yeah, I will pull that. Hang on just a minute. Go over here, and there we are. We're just going to have to let my old-ass laptop load up a little bit. There we go. This is actually a pretty unbiased and generally informative article out of Australia. So yeah, despite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange being kept in his prison cell for up to 23 hours a day in London's high-security Belmarsh prison, it has not stopped him from winning a major award. The Catalan Dignity Commission has honored him with its 2019 Dignity Prize for raising awareness around the world about the plight of the Catalans in the lead up to the 2017 independence vote. This is, the advice Assange gave to the Catalans on how to use apps to avoid Spanish government shutdowns was acknowledged. I'd like to, the quote by Julian's mom, I think is where I'll stop reading, but it's beautiful, so I'm going to. Assange's mother, Christine, said this deeply meaningful dignity award from the Catalan Dignity Commission, in gratitude for Julian's courageous journalism, recognizes the essence of his belief and practice that a fierce, free, truthful, and independent media holding governments and other powerful entities accountable to the people is the most important protection we have to defend freedom and democracy. I will bring it back to the screen. And Emmy, if that was you signing off, then please go ahead and do so and let people know where they can find you. And thank you so much. And I really do look forward to being able to meet you in London, and I'm probably going to want to give you a hug because you're adorable and I love you.
Thank you. I'm a Greek Emmy at MEB at Greek Emmy in Twitter. I write for the wiseupaction.info website, and I also have my own blog at greekemmy.com. And you will find me on the streets with my colleagues at the Committee to Defend Julian Assange in our outside Bamash and in the streets of London. So goodbye from me, and good luck. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I look forward to meeting you as well in February. All right, everybody, that was Emmy B. Do follow her on Twitter. Like Christy was saying earlier, she's been a huge inspiration and role model to so many of us when it comes to freeing Julian Assange. So thank you so much for...
You're doing great. You're doing great. Keep going.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So, Steve, I'll let you pick it back up from there, from where you were at.
I mean, this just highlights in real time the need for WikiLeaks. What the hell just happened to my camera? You asshole. All right, there we go.
This is another example of something Julian Assange has done to help others. I mean, outside of his work with WikiLeaks, ultimately, when he was tweeting about this, you know, you could very well say that led to his internet being cut off because he was seen as getting politically involved. And so when we talk about Julian Assange and we have our politicians saying he's some sort of bad actor, we do have beyond WikiLeaks showing what kind of character he has as far as helping others and being concerned for others.
Cool. So one quick thing, if I could, we talk a lot about the case, but I just want to more specifically for the UK viewers that we have right now, educate you a little bit on what the Espionage Act is, because it's a really obscure law. The Espionage Act makes it a crime to interfere or attempt to undermine or interfere with the efforts of the U.S. armed forces during a war or in any way assist the war effort of the nation's enemies. It was passed by Congress June 15th, 1917, 2 months after the United States entered World War I. It was ruled as constitutional in 1919 by the Supreme Court, and the punishment for it ranges anywhere from $10,000 in fines to 20 years in prison to the death penalty. So just to make sure that everyone can kind of have a common understanding. That's
and this
what
is
he's being
also
tried.
the first time it's being used against a journalist.
I do believe in the early 1960s there was some amending it too that allowed it to be extended to anybody outside of the United States. It could be used on, and that's where we're getting into this predicament here that Julian Assange has not been in the United States. None of the publishing he did happened in the United States. But there has been some changes to the Espionage Act over the years that are allowing it to be extended and used in this way.
Right. So I want to thank, I think we're going to be wrapping up here. I do want to thank Gordon Dimmack for collaborating with us and allowing us to stream on his channel. And also, Steve, thanks for letting us use your channel as well. I appreciate it. All of us do.
And Jason
I want to thank
Carney
our two guests.
with people that Jason Carney with people of the 99% on
Yes.
Facebook.
Oh my gosh, Jason Carney, thank you. I'm so sorry. See, that's the problem when you name people, you just forget. I'm sorry, Jason Carney, people of the 99%. Thank you very much. I also want to thank, of course, Tariq, Haddad, and Emmy B for joining us and for coming on. Yeah, so I want to thank you guys for that. I'm looking at something in the chat right now. Okay, just to make sure that I'm going about this the right way as far as signing off. So yeah, we're going to close out. And if you are new here, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. My name is Taylor Hudak, and you can follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Taylor Hudak. And also follow Action for Assange on Twitter at action_4 Assange. Thank you guys so much for watching these vigils with us, for joining us. And thank you to everybody who donated. We are so grateful for that. And then you can also just share the link if you have donated or you can't donate. Sharing the link is very helpful too. So thank you guys so much. And it was a great episode today. And I will hand it over to Christy.
Yeah, I just want to thank a couple of our final donations, Muriel and Peter. Thank you so much for donating. Please continue to share the link throughout the week. We are coming into these final 6 weeks before the extradition hearing, so please help us get us over to London, get us to DC. We will be each staying in these locations for a full week, so that is another reason why we do need to raise money to help with lodging and transportation back and forth. You can follow me at Christy Doff on Twitter, and thanks to all of our guests today, and thanks to all of you for joining us at this special time. Thanks to Gordon for letting us stream. Steve, thank you for letting us use your time slot of your normal show and your channel as well.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. My name is Andrew Smith. And real quick, I want to give a shout out to Susie Dawson and the 1 versus 5i campaign. You can find her on Twitter at the number 1 VS, the number 5, the letter I. And it's basically she's trying to sue the intelligence agencies to be able to get more accountability for what's been going on in regards to her situation as well as the situation at large. She held a bunch of great workshops and has a bunch of great resources for activists that literally just teaches you about what the function of government is to attack activists and how to defend yourself against it, and multiple other things. So, yeah.
Well, if this is the first time you're seeing me, my name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find here on the YouTubes. Man, that was a lot. There's a lot to unpack in what just happened today. Yeah, big thanks to Gordon and Tariq Haddad and to Emmy and to my co-hosts. I will be back next Sunday with my regular show. You can expect an interview with David Trondheim and Al Suarez, who are putting together a documentary on the siege of the Venezuelan embassy. They were both on the ground for that. I have Slow News Day episodes with Al live from the embassy. It was it still is a hell of a thing. So please look for that. You can find me on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. Man, I love you guys. Thank you. Good luck to us all. I'm going to play a video of Chelsea Manning speaking. What was the date on this?
May 19th, 2019, I believe.
Okay.
May 16th, 2019.
Yeah. And thanks, y'all. Why does my computer do this? There we go.
So 2 months ago, the federal government issued me a subpoena as here at this to appear before this courthouse before the grand jury. As a general principle, I object to the whole institution of grand juries. Prosecutors run grand juries behind closed doors in secret. Based on my refusal to answer questions 2 months ago, the grand jury, compelled me to, or in order to try to compel me to testify, they sent me into confinement. So I got released last week, and here I am today with the same subpoena, or a different subpoena with the same questions. Throughout this ordeal, I have had an enormous amount of support from some of the most closest people that I have, and also from like an enormous number of people online and through letters and through cards, and it's just been incredibly inspiring and really powerful for me. Jails and prisons exist as a dark institution, and despite that, it doesn't frighten me or disturb me. I mean, I've already been to jail, I've already been to prison, so attempting to coerce me with a grand jury subpoena is just not going to work. I will not cooperate with this or any other grand jury. So it doesn't matter what it is or what the case is, I'm just not going to comply or cooperate. Facing jail again, potentially today, doesn't change my stance. The prosecutors are deliberately placing me in an impossible position. Go to jail and face the prospect of being held in contempt again, or in the alternative, foregoing my principles, the strong positions that I have, that I hold dear. And the latter is a far worse prison or jail than the government could ever produce. So the truth is that no matter what happens today, whether I'm placed in confinement or not, I'm not going to comply with this grand jury. Thank you. All right, questions?
You have to actually physically go to the grand jury, tell them that, and then get hauled in front of a judge?
Okay, I turn the stream off. Record is off and OBS is off.
Cool.
Oh,